followed here with Carlos Sanchez, who is the fellow for the Artivism Fellowship. And we have a previous intern from the Artivism Fellowship, Shane Lara. And he is going to begin this entire program with a land acknowledgement. So thank you, Shane.
Thank you, guys. How are we doing today? All right. I'd like to introduce myself in my tribal language, and it goes, Kaha Tesha Hahat Suahatsi Kambaki Shane. Hello, everybody. Hello, friends. Good morning. My name is Shane, and today I will be reading our land acknowledgement. I am indigenous. I'm an enrolled member of the Natchitoches tribe of Louisiana, and I just want to share this today. Today, we respectfully recognize that we are situated on the ancestral lands of the indigenous peoples of California's central San Joaquin Valley, who have been stewards of this land since time immemorial. This region is the traditional homeland of the Yokuts and Mono peoples, to whom we extend our deepest respect and gratitude. California is home to 110 federally recognized tribes, with 81 more seeking federal recognition, each with their own unique cultures and traditions. We recognize that land acknowledgements are only the first steps towards justice and reconciliation, and it is crucial that we also confront the history of genocide and cultural erasure that Native American communities have endured. And on that same token, we must also recognize indigenous peoples are not extinct and that they are still here. As we move forward, we honor the tribes who are here first and continue to stand with them in their ongoing journey of healing and resilience. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Shane. All right. How's everybody doing this afternoon? Great, great. Hot, a lot of different things. Yeah, it's quite a bit going on. Today is going to be pretty hot, but luckily we got the AC to help us out. And some ice cream. If you haven't gotten some ice cream, there is some ice cream up at the front to help you kind of cool down. And so, let me get a quick second. I apologize. My phone decided to act up a little bit. There we go. All right. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for coming to our event, Unheard Echoes, The Silencing of Due Process. Like I mentioned before, I'm Joshua Slack, the cultural organizer for the Pan Valley Institute, and I'm here with Carlos Sanchez, the Artivism Fellow for the Pan Valley Institute. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of a brief introduction to what the Artivism program is at Pan Valley. The Artivism program is an initiative by the Pan Valley Institute that aims to utilize art and culture as powerful tools to address pressing social issues. And so Artivism engages a broader audience and develops creating public programming that fosters active citizenship in intergenerational learning spaces for immigrants and refugees. So by nurturing the cultural expression, reclaiming cultural rights, and promoting solidarity with communities, Artivism empowers participants to become agents of social change. The program's goals include expanding learning opportunities, developing public art and culture projects, and forming alliances with like-minded organizations. So it's really important for us as Artivism to find that intersection between art and activism, hence the name, and really using that to promote and find social change, especially with what's going on in our country, and the work is always going to continue. And through Artivism, my own personal journey, I've gone from being a fellow during the 2021 to 2022 cohort, where I was able to develop my one-man performance known as Code Switch, which was a one-man performance really examining my own personal relationship and having to navigating white-dominated spaces where I do not feel comfortable being myself. So being able to transmute that life experience into an artistic expression is when I really started to understand and get an appreciation for what Artivism really is and the dialogue that comes with it. And that piece was actually written while I was in the NICU while my daughter was born. And it was, I had to have a code switching experience during that time as well. And I was able to have a time where I was going through one of the hardest times of my entire life to be able to utilize my art not only for the social change, but for my own personal change and development right there in that moment. And it's crazy to think about that was born at the same time as my daughter, who is on her way right now, and she is now a 3-year-old firecracker who is so much. And from that, I was able to return as an Artivism Fellow during the 2023 to 2024 program, where I was, it was myself as the Artivism Fellow with 3 interns, Natalie Moreno, Shane Lara, who was just up here giving the land acknowledgement, and Chinu Vang. And they all contributed, we all contributed our personal stories where we were explaining our own personal relationship with what was going on in the country. And as we were sharing those different testimonies, sharing our own cultural experiences, we started to find that there was an intersection that we all had this similar umbrella that we were under when it came down to our relationship with America. And as we shared those testimonies, we shared them with the previous Artivism Fellow, Rodolfo Robles Cruz, who, where is he at? I don't know where he's at. But he's here today as well. And he wrote a piece known as My Relationship with America, which you will be able to witness in the next few minutes. And My Relationship with America takes inspiration from the Teatro Campesino work known as the Acto, which were theater performances that they would perform in order to inform inform farm workers about their rights in the most unconventional spaces. So whether that be right outside of a truck, at a gas station, just somewhere that was not the traditional theater space, which is why we are not utilizing the stage in order to have that same kind of framework, that not to be in those same Eurocentric kind of ideals of what theater and performance really is. And so My Relationship with America was the culmination of the last cohort, and that was last year. Actually, I think it's a year to the day. It might be a year to the day that we performed that right across the street at Dulce up front, and now we're here at the Big Red Church. So thank you to the Big Red Church for allowing us to continue that work. And so after that cohort, I went from being a fellow to now being on the staff at the Pan Valley Institute as the cultural organizer through the 2024 to 2027 program. And in this position, I'm a part of developing the dialogues and events such as our previous event that we had, which was the Juneteenth Reclaiming Our History event, and now this event, the Unheard Echoes, Silencing of Due Process. And my journey of Artivism is a testament to development skills that I've attained as a leader, as an artist, as a speaker, as a cultural organizer, and I have been stretched to a point where I didn't even know that I could be stretched to in those positions, because I underestimated my own value and skill, and I'm thankful for the Pan Valley team for being able to see that in me. And I sometimes take for granted that position because I find myself in, because this work that we do at Pan Valley through the Artivism Fellowship is a lot of invisible and emotional labor and work to be able to put on events, and not only just put on events, but to continuously advocate for that social change and to be able to speak up for those who do not have the platform to always speak. It is work, but it is beautiful and rewarding work. And even though it is something that I did take for granted, I now am able to, I do see the blessing that it is, and I am living my ancestors' wildest dreams in this position. So I'm very grateful for that. And to give a little bit more information as to what PVI is, I've been mentioning the Pan Valley Institute. I'm sure everybody here knows, but I'm not sure. We might have some people that may not know. So PVI, it's an immigrant-led popular education organization based in Fresno, California, and it emphasizes women, youth, and indigenous populations, and expands its cross-generational work to the other counties in the San Joaquin Valley, including Tulare, Merced, and Madera. So we foster citizenship and offer intergenerational learning spaces for immigrants and refugees to realize their possibilities of becoming social actors for change. We build spaces where immigrants and refugees can learn from each other, develop a sense of belonging, reclaim their cultural rights, and prepare to create caring and culturally vibrant communities. The work is guided by principles of popular education, cultural exchange, participatory action research, and decolonial pedagogy. We dream in a California Central Valley that all people are respected, culturally diversity is valued, and communities live in a socially, racially, and economically just world. So PVI provides spaces where immigrants and refugees feel safe and welcome, that they can learn from each other, reclaim their cultural rights, and build a sense of belonging and power for social change. And that is all I have to say at this time. So right now, please, Carlos, if you have anything that you would like to share, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Josh. Can anybody, yeah, a round of applause for Josh. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Carlos Oliveira Sanchez. I am this year's Artivism Fellow. And my background is primarily in theater arts and education. And through this fellowship, I'm grateful to now add community organizing to that list. Thanks to the amazing folks at Penn Valley Institute, Joshua Slack, Mirna Martinez, Estela Galvan, and Minerva Mendoza, who's currently on sabbatical. So during my time at PVI, I've had the opportunity to connect with various organizations and community leaders to do powerful work to uplift communities in the Central Valley, especially those often left without the resources or platforms to advocate for themselves. As someone rooted in theater, what was especially meaningful to me was the opportunity to work on something that directly engages with the urgent issues of our time. For the first time in my career, it felt like I was working on something that not only reflects what's happening in the world, but also responds to it. Work that speaks truth and pushes back. And what I'm referring to specifically is something that Josh mentioned, our one-act play that you're about to see, My Relationship with America, which is actually my introduction to Penn Valley Institute a year ago. Its themes and presentations, like Josh mentioned, really reminded me of El Teatro Campesino, which is a theater group that has deeply, deeply influenced me as an artist when I first heard about them in my Latinx theater class run by Dr. Gina Sandy Diaz, who's actually here with us and actually worked with us on the play. So thank you, Gina. With this new iteration of My Relationship with America, it truly felt like a group-devised theater piece. Everybody contributed their lived experiences and voices to the script, which was then shaped by our former fellow, Rodolfo Robles Cruz, who's right here in the back too, thank you. But at the heart of my fellowship has been organizing this very event alongside everybody, the whole team at Penn Valley, with the hope of creating a space for those feeling overwhelmed by the weight of the new policies and executive orders, a space of solidarity and solace where we can come together to reflect on the past and present and say you're not alone, and to hopefully gain some clarity. When I began researching for this event a few months ago, before things really started to escalate, I was mostly focused on the past. The history of Executive Order 9066 often goes unheard, especially here in Fresno, where actual concentration camps were built. And I know it was true for me, but a lot of people my age don't know that when I talk to them about it. And I think it's important we keep that history alive. But as time went on and the executive overreach continued, it became clear to me that what I was studying wasn't the past. What I was studying was actually a mirror facing our present day. The language, the intent, the harm, the utter violation of human rights, it's all happening again. So knowing that this event would happen, that people would gather here to push back, to stand up, to just care, that has been a huge comfort and motivating force for me. So I just want to say thank you for being here, and thank you to the Penn Valley Institute for the opportunity to be a part of this work.
Thank you so much, Carlos. And Carlos began to mention exactly what this event is, and I'll elaborate a little further. What we came up with was an event that brought to light the issues that are going on today, as well as connecting to the past, utilizing and bringing light to the history of Executive Order 9066. And as Carlos mentioned, that it was an executive order that happened during World War II that incarcerated Japanese Americans. And it was important for us to bridge the gap between the past and the present, because there is value in learning about your history in order to know how to address what is happening in the present. There's an African word, it's actually a bird in Africa known as the Sankofa bird. Sankofa means to look back so that you can look forward. And that is a very similar methodology that we're using today for this event, which is why we have the multimedia exhibit there, which is a multimedia exhibit of a documentary that premiered appeared on PBS that was actually produced here in Fresno that talked about the Japanese incarceration and how it applied here to the Central Valley. Like Carlos mentioned, the Fresno Fairgrounds was a location for concentration camps, and I believe also there were some in Merced as well. So this is not, this land that we live on is it is historical in that sense, and we want to bring light to it so that we can learn and be aware of what is currently going on under the current administration and what we are seeing in our politics on a day-to-day basis right now, even as we speak. And so in doing this research, and Carlos was able to intersplice the documentary, so it's a very abridged version. You can find the full thing on YouTube. It's about, I believe, 2 hours. It's about a 2-hour documentary. We got 15 minutes. So if you've learned a lot from those 15 minutes, you will learn a lot, of course, from the entire 2-hour documentary. So, and it's also why we decided for My Relationship with America to also be a part of this event, because though that this is a very specific history that affected the Japanese Americans, we're starting to see that because of that history and because of that practice, it is affecting so many more of the citizens here in this country. And so each of us have our own personal relationship with America, whether that be in the past, present, or in the future. And that history, that not just that particular point in history, but just so many different injustices that has happened in this country still ring true today, which is why we have the name for the event, Unheard Echoes, because these are things that are silenced. Not that they never happened, but that there has been an intentional silencing of the voices of those that have been affected by these systems, and now we are seeing that there is a silencing of the very notion of due process in this country. And that is the whole point of this entire event. So we are going to have, of course, the multimedia exhibit, which is there. We have the My Relationship with America paper, and I made an announcement a few different times, but even if you have already wrote something or if you haven't written anything, you can write as much as you would like, but what exactly is your relationship with America? And we hope that from today you start to think a lot more critically and consciously about exactly what that might be. And it's always better to just write it all out instead of keeping it all in there, because it is an overwhelming thought to have. And so we would love to have you just place it on the wall, and even as we go through the play, if your mind starts to shift and change, just continue to write. And after the one-act play, will be followed by a panel discussion with 4 amazing panelists that are going to be talking as far as the history of the Japanese incarceration, civil rights within America, the immigration rights, and just what is happening within our own community and how we started to see a shift in the paradigm going on in this country ever since the inauguration in January. And after the panel discussion, there will be a moment to have a Q&A, reflections, and dialogue. So you as attendees get to a chance to not only talk to the panelists, but the actors, or talk amongst each other, just when it comes down to what is it that you've learned and what is it that you have taken away from this event. And after that, we get to eat. We're going to have some food at the very end, and we ask that you stay, mingle, have some food, still enjoy the multimedia exhibit, talk amongst each other, and that will be our program for today. I was about to say amen, but, you know, amen. All right, and so I have nothing else to say, so we are going to go ahead and get ready for the My Relationship with America performance. So as the actors begin to make their way to the stage, just be ready for what you're about to experience. Thank you.
Okay, you guys ready? Take your seats. All right, thank you everybody. Very briefly, so what we're gonna see is a stage reading, which means the actors still have the script in their hands. We are still in the process of staging. We do want to do a full staging of this play, which will be presented at the Salt of the Earth event, which is announced in your tables. So for now, we are workshopping. That's what we call it in theater when we're in this stage. Workshopping the script, working together through it. The idea was conceived by a past fellow, Rodolfo Robles Cruz, who is back there and will be reading for the professor. There's a professor in this play, and so he's gonna do the voice of the professor. And then these are our lovely actors. So we have Josh Slack, and we have Shane Lara, Dalicia Torresillas, Julian Heng, and Carlos Oliveira Sanchez. And they have all shared pieces of their personal stories, and we have weaved those together with historical facts and then the stories of other people that we know about to create this story that you're gonna enjoy right now. So without further ado, my relationship with America.
My relationship with America. Setting, a liminal space in between our hellish education system and the everyday outside world. The nether space of the online world where guilt lives and our lives are counted by the amount of social posts we make. Somewhere where time is clicking by and where we are 89 seconds until midnight. Somewhere where our leaders are not of our own choosing and genocide exists. A college classroom in California's Central Valley, intruding in the unspoken quiet places where our deepest thoughts linger, in the imagination of every person of color who's ever been asked a stupid fucking question. The helpless location of ignorance and frustration, 2025 and all the time before, 2025 and all the time after. Who? You. Your neighbors, your friends, the ones we ignore every single second of every single day. For this iteration, it is Dalicia, Josh, Carlos, Julian, Shane. Note, this is not realism, but it is all too real at the same time. Don't mistake this for corny. It is earnest at best. This is a call to action, a history lesson. It is fast and furious. It is the unspoken finally breathing. We begin. Now, the Declaration of Independence was a document that severed the colony's political connection to which country across the pond?
Great Britain.
Great Britain is correct. Now, you may remember the remnants of the rebellious acts leading up to the political brilliance of signing a Declaration of Independence, such as which famous political protest of 1773?
The Boston Tea Party.
Very good, yes, the Boston Tea Party. Jumping back again, the Declaration of Independence was signed when?
July 4th, 1776.
Correct. And this is not to be confused by the Revolutionary War, which encompassed what timeline?
1775 to 1783.
Correct. Now, following the signing of the Declaration of Independence, as well as the American Revolutionary War, this young country was still beginning to discover what it really meant to be free.
Okay, all right.
So now I pose a question to you. As a byproduct of the sovereignty of our great nation, freedom is something we all get to experience today. So, what does America mean to you? Please use a number 2 pencil and a college rule paper for this response. Is everyone ready? The timer is on. You may begin. All methodically take out a piece of paper to write with. All look at the paper for 8 counts. All write furiously for a while. All crumple up the paper and take out a new one. All put their heads down. Each thought spoken out loud is actually the inner workings of their minds, not connected but somehow in conversation. Carlos is still and perplexed the entire time.
I was asked today,
What is your relationship with America? Okay.
Wow.
What a simple question.
It wasn't asked in malice.
I mean, it was for class. He asked us for class purposes.
What a simple question.
What is your relationship with America?
I mean, sure, he's white.
The student be sending me into a spiral.
What kind of answer does he want?
What is my relationship with America?
Hey, his relationship with America is way different than mine.
Does he want me to be dead ass?
I mean, because when you unpack it...
Well, who is the "your" he's talking about? Me? We?
I'll be dead ass.
What is my relationship with the Americans?
I mean,
Is it?
it's a generational question, right? I'm a product of many generations of various stages of relationships.
But I don't think he wants to know all that.
He must want the liberation angle.
I wish I had a liberation angle.
Yeah, too bad it doesn't exist.
Hey. Okay.
The time is ticking.
What is my relationship with America?
I guess I'm not sure.
Man, this class is whack.
I could get a 0 on this and still pass the class with an A, I think.
Am I the only one that's confused here?
At least I don't look as confused as Carlos.
Focus, Julian, focus.
Carlos?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask, my actual relationship with America, how I feel about it.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Motherfucker, I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well,
Also, I need a little bit of clarification. Would you like us to accept or deny the fact that our relationship is so deeply tied to the relationship with our communities? Or, let me phrase this better. Who is the "your" in reference to in your question?
And when speaking of our relationship with America, would you like us to touch on just how it is today?
Or are you expecting us to look backwards into the annals of history to determine why our relationship with America is the way it is today?
I mean, should this be limited to the Americas that we know today? Or should this also encompass the relationship we had pre-colonialism?
Does this extend to militarized territories? If I lived in another country but still influenced by the modern American military complex, does that still count?
Wait, should this be a reference to the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence?
Good
Or
point.
perhaps neither?
Some clarification would be extremely helpful.
Extremely, yeah, definitely.
yes. Yes, I say interpret it how you will. I'm sorry, what was that?
Enrich. We are enriched and empowered by your clarification. Thank you so much.
Somehow this simplification makes everything more confusing now.
Man, fuck this class.
Okay. I got this.
Man, he's gonna regret letting me go in on this shit. Ugh.
My relationship with America. What is my relationship with America? It begins with what I remember. I remember I was 3 years old when I came to this country. I remember Tom and Jerry, Scooby-Doo, and Powder. I remember being my first English teacher. I remember catching up, feeling like I was catching up. Seeing my moms in the morning and my dad. They would work altering time blocks, so one would always say, I remember taking everything in. I remember I was young enough to develop an American accent. Would that make it for real? Is that what it took to be an American? I remember they stopped speaking Spanish to me after first grade. Today it runs away from me, from my mind. Y ahora lo que se me hacía fácil decir en mi niñez es traducido por el maldito Google Translate. Others don't know it. Some were never taught it. It was a distraught and desperate attempt to help their children fit in. A ludicrous survival tactic.
It begins with what I learned. In 1619, prior to the American Revolution, the British colonies inhabiting the occupied land of the Americas welcomed a ship carrying 20 enslaved African people to Jamestown. 1619 marked a dark and the beginning of a horrific history that continued well into the 19th century. This young nation began with a tainted history, following the historical pattern of the transatlantic slave trade established well before its birth. All that emancipation shit couldn't break from the same shit that benefited their oppressors. You know, I recognize that word. Survival. Echoes of the past transformed into parental lessons. Be nice. Comply. Hands out your pockets. Whispers from centuries of demonization. The bones of the caste system are still alive in my relationship with America.
Avoid getting killed.
Disproportionately, horrifically.
Secretly.
Like undocumented people.
Oh, like under the apologetic guise of the threatened police officer.
Like the ignored, missing, murdered indigenous women of my community, lost to a system that does not work with us and never has worked with us.
Instead, against us.
Designed to trap us.
See, it begins with what was stolen. House Concurrent Resolution 331. From the mouth of Congress, the original framers of the Constitution, including most notably George Washington and Benjamin Franklin, these men are known to have greatly admired the concepts of the Six Nations of the Iroquois Confederacy, and yet we are forgotten and we are disrespected. The Congress acknowledges the Constitution made by the Iroquois Confederacy and other Indian nations to the formation and development of the United States of America. I've had a relationship with my homeland long before the forced displacement. Displacement from your homeland has spiritual, physical, and mental consequences, you know? The Congress specifically acknowledges and reaffirms the trust, responsibility, and obligation of the United States government to Indian tribes, including Alaska Natives, for their preservation, protection, and enhancement. Removed, stolen from, forgotten, and powerless, the lack of control tribes have on their own lands is infuriating. If a non-native rapes or kills a native woman, the tribal police are not allowed to prosecute them. The most they can do is hold them for a few hours, and if the state does nothing, the perpetrator will walk free. Non-natives will specifically target our people because they know that they can get away with it. We've existed thousands of years before the United States was even an idea. The Haudenosaunee, known by Congress as the Iroquois Confederacy, were America's first democracy that inspired the structure of the U.S. Constitution. My nation survived erasure from 3 empires in less than 100 years. I am loyal to my tribe. I hold America accountable for the ignorance and crimes against my people.
I can still recall my childhood. People are surprised when I say that, but I can. I remember all of it. Even the small details people forget, like going to Avocado Lake on Easter. Details like running around the park with all my cousins, free to wander the giant fields alone. Details like grabbing confetti eggs quietly and discreetly, hiding it behind my back, and coming up to my cousin's head real slow and BAM! Cracking on their heads as all the colors came pouring out. I remember details like my parents telling me I must always be calm and collected in public. Here I could play, but out there, calm and collected. I think that's why I was so good at cracking eggs on their heads. I would be calm and collected. To hit someone's head, is this part of my relationship with America?
Yo, how do I cite Tom and Jerry?
Ay, no, Carlos, por favor.
Hey, can my Apple Watch use ChatGPT?
I don't know, I'm not even that far. How much time do we even have left?
I wonder if he'll actually read these papers.
Nah, man.
I mean, I remember my childhood, right? I remember everything. Why do we always gatekeep everything? My relationship with America is changing. My dream is to bring people together. The Central Valley is a melting pot with so many vibrant people and backgrounds. It is one of the most culturally rich areas in the country. And to me, the American dream is to be able to live the way we want. No oppression, no segregation, no stigma.
Is my relationship with America cemented?
Historically speaking,
It feels like it's only getting worse.
Yeah, well, progress is an illusion.
They're always coming for us. We're like walking targets.
The ICE rates.
Well, but there's always an excuse.
they tell us.
They tell us.
We're keeping the peace.
They
tell us.
They tell us. They're just a bunch of lazy, primitive drunks killing themselves anyway, they say.
They tell us.
They tell us.
If you don't like it here, then go back.
They tell us. They tell us.
One less criminal.
They tell us. They tell us.
They're inciting violence.
They tell us. They tell us.
Question. I have a question.
Clarifying question,
I'm not sure if
please.
Yes.
I'm a little worried I might come across as ungrateful or upset with what I'm writing now.
Will points be deducted based on patriotism?
Or lack of it.
I mean, I'm worried I might sound angry, and I'm worried it will affect the way that you view me from here on out.
Yeah, temporary and valid human emotions carry long-term ramifications.
I mean, I would be considered the overly emotional Mexican if I don't get this tone just right.
Yeah, and exactly, because the angry black man image is hard to shake out of people's heads.
Even though it is a valid human emotion that we all experience, we simply...
Crack that egg.
And maybe, let me be clear, the people, the community, the privilege I hold aren't forgotten.
I experience joy.
And joy. Joy is resistance, right?
But how much freedom, I mean truth, are we allowed to voice in this paper?
Yeah,
that's a
please,
pretty
be
good
honest,
question.
because we don't want to
Yes. Well, I say continue to write as freely as you will. No deduction will occur for speaking your honest truth.
Right.
Right, yeah. Heard that before. All right. Okay.
Well, perhaps I can't talk about my relationship with America without talking about my relationship with the American dream.
The reason for the season.
Global expansion and domination seems a lot more fitting.
Golden ticket to the Golden State.
The American dream, a catalyst, a reason, a match and the gasoline, a marketing strategy, a way to get cheap labor, an assimilation tactic, a divisive internal barrier, perhaps the reason for the way things are now, the reason I was terrified of failure. I was born here, but when I was 7, my dad made my family move to Mexico. We left everything behind, our life, our home, our roots. When we moved, we couldn't enroll in school because it was too late in the school year, so my mom took me and my brother to this community center. And I found a new hobby, theater. Growing up in a world that is constantly changing, my only constant was this type of art form. And it was my therapy, my outlet, my safe space. The only way I was able to express myself and feel heard. This thing that I'm doing now saved my life. It truly did. After 10 years in Mexico, I had to make a choice to continue my education, so I decided to return back to a place that I once called home, Fresno. At 17 years old and enrolled into my junior year of high school, but I lost my theater dream. They told me that I couldn't enroll in a drama class because I didn't speak English. They told me that I couldn't attend a 4-year university if I didn't speak English proficiently. My American dream was based on a false narrative. There was my American dream of education, and there was their American assignment to me, which was labor. I remember working so hard to assimilate. Lessons passed down to me to help me achieve this American dream.
Lessons.
How to achieve the American dream.
You must control your anger. Hushtina. Dangerous.
Calladita te ves más bonita.
Stop crying before I give you a reason to.
Calm down. 1, 2, 3.
No fidgeting. Stand still. Remain focused.
Mientras vivas bajo mi techo se hace lo que yo digo y punto.
You have to be great at everything.
Remember to smile.
You must participate. Others still think you're stupid.
Lessons. One of the best lessons was when Adrika, my tribal mother, said my gift of spoken word was a gift by Creator himself, and that my tribe needs me. I was a hip-hop artist, big hip-hop head. But everybody told me that, don't do that, that's just for thugs and gangsters. But when I met her for the first time, the tribal educator of my tribe, she adopted me as her son and was the first to tell me that my voice, it had value. She smudged me with sage that day, ensuring that my gifts would always be protected from those who would try to manipulate and abuse it.
One of the best lessons I had was when I was in school, and I was insecure about my voice when I started doing theater. But they encouraged me. I had a voice, and I had to use it. Whether as a performer, a speaker, or a leader, this lesson transformed me. But what can I do when the National Guard comes to my neighborhood and incites violence? What then?
Push the knot. Dangerous. Control your anger.
Stay quiet.
You must not cry.
Picture your mom counting down from 3.
Focus.
You must be generous.
Do what they say.
Behave nicely.
Hands out your pockets.
Hang around the right people.
Be aware of your surroundings.
Come home early.
Your education comes first.
Make sure your hair is done.
Go inside and close the doors.
Remain calm. Remain collected.
You go inside and you close the doors.
The way out is through. There were 2 modes of education happening here. The academic mode, from school, and the social expectations taught to me by my family. Spanish was valuable to me. It is my language. But as soon as I got here, this country treated it like it was my weakness. You know, when I went back to school, I worked really hard. And I worked my way into entering a 4-year university. I started with a criminology major. I figured I should choose a career that would pay me good money. But my heart was told me not to give up on my passion. So I went and I changed my major to theater arts the same day of my orientation. I pursued my passion and I joined the 20% of Latinas with a bachelor's degree. I helped the number flourish.
I was a good student because I wanted to play football, and you can't play football if you don't have good grades. I thought this was my way up and out because we were poor. And not like middle class poor, I mean truly we were poor. My parents, like many, were field workers and severely underpaid. My mom would sometimes work in factories seasonally as well. But it was all considered unskilled labor. I remember she would work this factory job where she would bottle this strawberry syrup. For hours on hours, she would do this 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. daily. She left every evening in a stark white uniform, from head to toe, in all brilliant white. And she would return home with splatters of strawberry red stains all over her body. It seemed whimsical at the time, like if she were painting her own outfit every single day. One day, the machine that dispensed the syrup was jammed, and on this day, she was the one to go unjam it. But something malfunctioned, and her hand was caught in the machine and sliced it open. I remember her coming home early that night. She came home instead of the hospital to avoid the bill. She came home with her hand sliced open, determined to mend it herself. That night, I couldn't tell the difference between the red strawberry stains and her blood.
The stains of capitalism.
Working to no end. Working to death.
You know, that is a good point. I mean, I was a good student too. I mean, when the topics made sense to me. I don't think some of the teachers understood that their point of view was never really in line with my own. But how could they? They could never grasp the rich history of indigenous people, how my grandmother, Angelique Hassanet, mediated between two of the strongest empires at the time in the early 1700s. I never saw myself in any one of them. And you know, being indigenous and having indigenous blood is not the same thing. Some people have the blood but have forgotten who they really are. Indigeneity is a conversation I want to have, a conversation with people that have indigenous blood, but they just don't practice it. They don't practice the culture. Why embrace the colonized father and not your indigenous mother?
Define good student. You know, M.K. Asante once said that you always keep two sets of notes, one to ace a test and one to tell the truth. I had no black teachers until I had to apply to pay to get a higher education. And even then, the ones in charge of the Africana Studies program aren't always of the diaspora. So when K-12 came and it was time for me to read the paragraph in the history book that was about black history, that was the only black history I could ever get. I mean, except when it was at home. Yeah, and I guess Obama too, yeah.
Should I include Obama in my picture or my paper?
No, maybe.
Perhaps my relationship with America is dictated by the white leaders of our country has had.
Is Kamala Harris essential to my relationship with America?
You know, I guess my relationship did change when Obama took office, but it changed even more when Trump did too.
Hey, well, Claudia Sheinbaum is the first woman president of Mexico. Could this mean that we're getting closer here too? Maybe?
I'd be a great president.
president.
Well, I mean, since we're speaking of presidents here, the U.S. Constitution states that the president must be a natural-born citizen of the United States, be at least 35 years old, and have been a resident of the United States for about 14 years. As a native myself, though, I think I outrank all of those qualifications. Imagine me in the White House. Whew, even that name sounds racist. White House.
Ooh, Patsy Mink. In 1972, Patsy Mink appeared on the Oregon presidential ballot. She appeared on it to oppose her opposition to the Vietnam War. I like to think in some alternate universe where Patsy Mink actually moved forward and became president, what would that look like? I want to be like Patsy Mink.
A buzzer sounds. And that's the end of the quick ride. Perhaps we have some time to share our findings.
Ay, cielos.
I need that much time just to brainstorm.
You know, how could I zero in on just one part of my relationship?
Hey, yo, we gotta share this shit.
I know he's going to choose me first. I know he is.
All right, settle down, settle down. Hey, Julian, why don't you go first?
Okay, yes. Okay. My relationship with America began in 1980. This is the year Jimmy Carter signed the Refugee Act, allowing my parents to come to the United States as refugees. So my relationship with America is political, dependent, very new. New as someone who is Hmong, but as an Asian American, it stretches back in history, secretly weaving dark webs of dependency and quiet destruction. This long, dark history includes the Page Act of 1875, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, the Immigration Act of 1917 and 1924. And Fresno is excluded from this web of dark secrets. Number 934, the temporary detention camp for Japanese Americans at the Fresno Assembly Center, or as we know it today, the Fresno Fairgrounds. From May until October of 1942, over 5,000 Americans of Japanese descent were detained without trial or due process. Let it be known that the Fresno camp was a temporary hold before being transferred to the Jerome Relocation Center in Arkansas, one of 10 concentration camps established during World War II to incarcerate Japanese people. This historical wound set a precedent we see now in Florida with alligator Alcatraz. My relationship with America is tied to the others. I'm wounded too, you know. I'm Hmong, not Chinese, not Japanese, but we're generalized into those categories here. Why? We have a rich history too. My parents came here as refugees of the Secret War. They came to escape a genocide because it was stay and die or abandon everything for a chance to live. Secrets on secrets on secrets. My relationship with America is suppression. The Secret War in Laos began in 1964 and lasted until 1975, a war that our families did not commence but were coerced into playing an active role in. And that's something not taught in school. The CIA conducted a secret war in Laos that relied on Hmong soldiers, many of them in their teens, some as young as 10 years old. Many of them died, tens of thousands, both in their fighting and their escape attempts. This was a war that left Laos with the title of the most bombed country in the world. My relationship with America comes from war, from covert operations, from generational trauma, from having to be good and fit in, from the pursuit of being the model minority, calm and collected enough to succeed because my parents dreamt that for me, because they endured atrocities to watch me win, not to act a fool and fail. My relationship with America is pushed aside because being Asian American is often tangential at best, unspoken, unheard, calm, and collected. And guess what? Here I am making it happen. You go, bro.
You know, I was thinking I could name off historical facts and get into the nuances of a specific period in time to write this paper. I could recount memorized passages of American history in an effort to prove that I am clever, studied, or smart enough to pass this test. But in the reflection of conceiving this paper, I realized that American history is both past and in the present. I am living through significant events that will undoubtedly alter the shape of the American political and social landscape. So I'm worried about myself now. And I gotta be honest, America now is no different than America then. The America that captured African people and attempted to sever the connection to the homeland is the same America that murders black people in the street in daylight. The America that owned human beings as slaves is the same America that does nothing to prevent another massacre like Tulsa from happening. How about the American cops killing unarmed black people? How about the killing of Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, Oscar Grant, Sandra Bland, Eric Garner, Breonna Taylor, Philando Castile, George Floyd? I know it's old news, but we got to keep it going. And the ones that lost their lives to medical racism, to the mothers with the highest child infant mortality rate, to the misdiagnosed children with learning disabilities, to the men whose mental health rates continue to get downplayed. You know, I don't want to exploit the trauma. I don't. Because there's a history and exploitation of black folks from taking us from a country and breeding us here to become something else. We live in a constant state of identity crisis because we have a fractured connection to Africa that we have to live on a land fertilized and tainted by our own blood. A land that exploits our labor to build wealth that we cannot even touch. That exploits our art to turn us into minstrels instead of storytellers. That exploits our joy and rewards us with pain and suffering, declaring that it's righteous. My relationship with this land is fractured. It's broken. And at the same time, like a phoenix, we found a way to rise up from the ashes, even if they don't like how loud we can be, how colorful we can be, how wonderful we can be. My relationship with this land does not want me to just be me. It doesn't want me to just be me. My relationship with America is me trying to avoid to being a part of the trauma in the form of a statistic, a loss, you know, a death. Because that's what I am right now, just a statistic. And I am protesting the fact that our literacy scores continue to get lower and our incarceration rate gets higher and higher, protesting the fact that we account for nearly 40% of the incarceration count when we represent 13% of this country's population. Because that's what white supremacy has trained our cops, doctors, teachers, employers, lawyers, and soldiers to see me as just another number. To the point where my entire existence is radical. By simply existing and surviving and being in this system of anti-blackness, I am protesting.
I work my job. I pay my taxes. I am a productive member of society. So why am I scared? I once felt safe here. Now I could flip a coin and choose one or the other, and the danger are both the same. Choose between a government that will send masked agents to kidnap me and put me in a concentration camp, or leave it all and start from scratch in a country that I love, but it is not my home, with its own fears and dilemmas. Mi relación con América es frustrante y turbulenta. Me vine siguiendo el famoso sueño americano y me topé con una triste realidad. El sistema parece estar diseñado para que las minorías sigamos siendo minorías o sigamos estando ignorantes, sin profesiones y realizando los trabajos pesados, la mano de obra. Como si todo se alineara para que nos rindamos, para que fracasemos. Yo no quise sumar a esa cifra y sacrifiqué muchas noches sin dormir, muchos momentos importantes con mi familia. Fueron muchas lágrimas las que he derramado para poder hacer honor a la frase, sí se puede.
We sit on the stolen lands of the Yokuts and Mono people, a land acquired by the means of genocide. My journey, it's not like everyone else's, but on that same time, it is a shared experience. Knowledge is power, and there are things that need to be brought to life. Between 1819 and 1969, the United States operated 408 boarding schools across 37 states. These boarding schools targeted the American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian. Children in pursuit of policy of a cultural assimilation that coincided with Indian territorial dispossession. This system was set in place with the objective to dispossess Indian tribes, Alaska Native villages, and the Native Hawaiians. Part of this investigative report was further protection of brutal sites and potential repatriation or disinterment of remains of children under federal law. In these boarding school, students endured rampant physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, with the report flagging more than 500 deaths of Native children, a number that is expected to increase as the investigation continues. See, these schools were run by the churches, the so-called sanctuary, so it shouldn't surprise you why we resent Christianity. My relationship with American history carries a history of weight that is often shoved into the dark. The history of abuse for the sake of power has been going on for way too long. John Trudell, one of the faces of the American Indian movement, delivered a very powerful speech at the U.S. Capitol building, burning the U.S. flag on the steps of the building to protest the broken treaties, as well as the poor treatment of Native American and indigenous people. But less than 12 hours later, John's pregnant wife, 3 kids, and mother-in-law all burned to death in a house fire. No investigation by the FBI occurred, but we know what happened. John once said to protect your spirits because you are in a place where spirits get eaten. And where spirits get eaten and the government is trying to eat the souls of the men, children, and women. Russell Means once said, in these United States of America, we can be anything we want to be except Native American. The Indian Health Clinic would sterilize Native women without consent or knowledge in the 1970s because they believed that our women were too stupid to use birth control. See, it's important that we emphasize that many of the atrocities faced did not just happen a long time ago, but they are occurring in the current day. In a history where we have been disproportionately affected in plain disregard for our existence, now we suffer from disproportionate cases in missing and murdered indigenous women. And when I said genocide earlier, I mean it. Genocide. The government does not acknowledge it despite the genocide aligning with all the steps lined out by the UN. My relationship with America, it's abusive. I am in an abusive relationship with America. But my words that I say today are not born out of hatred. My mother taught me something in our Caddo language, and it goes like this: Wea hatu no seata, and that means, I love you with all my heart.
My relationship with American history is a transient one. My father crossed the border from Mexico to the US 100 times in the 80s. Legally, illegally, whatever felt right at the time for this country. When they needed cheap work, he was here. When they needed someone to blame, he was here. In the 50s, my grandpa was here. When cheap labor was needed, he crossed the border and worked here. We always went back. But for some reason, I'm here. For an education, for knowledge, for opportunity. Since when is this the only country with opportunities to give? What dream was sold to my parents to have them root out their lives and travel here? A world where the language is foreign, the neighbors are not neighborly. In the 50s, my grandfather came to the US as a field worker. He came through the Bracero program, a US government-sponsored program that brought millions of Mexican farm and railroad workers into the US to fill the agriculture worker shortage during World War II. I guess we aren't so scary when we're needed. My father joined quickly afterwards, and they both worked the fields of Central Valley for years, for decades. And they were among the group of workers that were suffering the terrible working conditions faced by the campesinos. And their labor is always taken for granted. A sliver of a dream is what they hold on to. But in the face of oppression, our community rose up to the occasion. In 1965, the United Farm Workers formed, and with it came El Teatro Campesino, an activist theater group that informed the campesinos of their rights, informed them of what they were fighting for. Art cut through the political lines and separation. A clear path was shown to the people. But in my short time on this planet, one image that is ingrained in my mind is this man-made scar cutting across the border of Mexico and the United States. A jarring symbol of hatred and prejudice, an obstacle for the path.
My relationship with American history is new and old, existing before I did. One of mass migrations and detention centers, of threatening legislature and need. The year is 2025, making this country's 60th quadrennial presidential inauguration. Not so fun fact, this inauguration was unlike any other, not just in tone or rhetoric, but in ritual. This president chose not to place his hands on the Bible when sworn in. At the time, it seemed like an odd omission. In hindsight, it feels less like an oversight and more like a forecast. This year, the fires are getting hotter, and ICE has gotten closer and closer to my people. Protests rising in Los Angeles, in Philadelphia, in DC, in Chicago, and Fresno. No kings. 2025, another marker of time passing, another mass deportation, another anxiety-driven state of panic.
I think about how we were all called rapists and killers. I think about how the American dream is so limited to whoever is in charge. The American dream changes every 4 years. And this January marked the beginning of a new American nightmare.
Many non-white Americans have been holding their breath since then, waiting to see if we can come up for some air. We've chanced it out, and we'll swim back up. Swim up the pool, hoping there was a lifeguard.
A convicted felon can't be a lifeguard. A convicted felon can't be a peacekeeper. So if the President of the United States is not going to protect us, then it is up to us as a community to stand up for each other, to everyone and to all my fellow military veterans. Stand up for the people like Se-Jun Park, a Purple Heart U.S. Army veteran. He was told by ICE that he had to leave the country voluntarily or be detained and deported. After 48 years, Se-Jun Park said goodbye to the country he fought and bled for. Goodbye to his children, to his family. Monday, June 23rd, 2025, a day of cold injustice, a day as cold as ice.
It's also time for us to stand against the corruption of this political system. The catalyst is a tragic one, and the action is an immediate one. We showed up and continue to show up to demand a country in which we are respected.
We demand a country where we can live peacefully as the first peoples of this land. Change is radical. It always has been. Change is in the hands of the people, not these gatekeeping politicians that are satisfied with keeping us down.
So when I'm asked about my relationship with America, it's a work in progress.
But I know something that is clear. My relationship with my community is growing and will continue to grow.
My relationship with my community is important. That's what's going to change the world.
We showed up and continue to show up to demand a world in which we are respected. Like the 1969 protest at UC Berkeley for American Indian Studies, like the Alcatraz occupation, like the Wounded Knee occupation.
We demand a world where we can live peacefully.
As long as we are in community, we can stand against the corruption of this political system.
See, being part of the solution to bridge the gap, to visit communities and bring our art to other people.
So remember,
Power to the people.
Lift your voice, don't stay quiet.
Lift your voice. 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 Don't stay quiet. Lift your voice. Don't stay quiet. Lift your voice. Don't stay quiet. Lift your voice. Don't stay quiet. Lift your voice. Don't stay quiet. Lift your voice.
Don't stay quiet.
Lift your voice.
Don't stay quiet.
Lift your voice. Don't stay quiet. Lift your voice.
Lift your voice.
Quiet.
Lift your voice.
Don't stay quiet.
Lift your voice.
Don't stay quiet.
Everybody,
voice.
don't stay quiet.
Lift your voice.
Don't stay quiet.
Lift your voice.
Don't stay quiet.
Don't stay quiet.
End of play.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you all, everybody. Thank you, actors. If you can give the actors another round of applause. And that was my relationship with America, our relationship with America, your relationship with America. And so now we're going to take a bit of a 10-15 minute break in order for us to move into our next part of the event today, which will be the panel discussion. But in the meantime, during that break, we still have the Your Relationship with America banner. So if you have a notepad on your table, or if you need something to write on, that whatever it is that you have going on in your head about what you're reflecting on from this piece, go ahead and feel free to write it down, and just take a few more minutes before we go on to the panel discussion. Thank you.
I've been walking with my face turned to the sun. Weight on my shoulders, a bullet in my gun. Oh, I got eyes in the back of my head.
Creo que salió.
All right, everybody. All right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. We're about to go ahead and get started with our panel discussion. So if you could make your way back to your seats and whatever discussions you're having, we just continue to get ready. All right? Okay. And so we have Gina, who is going to be our moderator for the panel discussion. All right, thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So we're gonna get started with our panel, Unheard Echoes, the silencing of due process. We just enjoyed a performance of My Relationship with America, where you heard some stories that are, real stories of people that have been impacted by immigration policies. And so this second part of our event is a conversation with specialists that have dedicated their professional lives to supporting immigrants and working with and against immigration reforms and policies. And so we'll have a chance to hear from their professional experience. And then after that, we'll have a chance to also converse and ask questions. I want to remind you that you do have some paper and pens in your table. So as we go along, if you have any questions, feel free to write them down so that when we get to our Q&A, you have a chance to bring those points up. All right, so the way in which we're going to move through the panel is I will introduce each of our panelists, and they'll have some time to share a presentation from their perspective. And then I'll move on and introduce the next panelist and so on and so forth. So our first panelist is Keiko Kubo. And Keiko is a sensei, third-generation Japanese-American who was born and grew up in and around Detroit, Michigan. She's a longtime resident of the Bay Area. In the late 1970s, the University of California, Berkeley received a National Endowment for the Arts grant to develop a symposium on art and literature in the World War II concentration camps, for which Keiko was a research assistant. Through this work, Asian American Studies co-sponsored an exhibit and a symposium with the Oakland Museum in the late 70s. It was called A View from the Inside, Art and Literature in America's Concentration Camps. She now co-chairs the Child and Family Detention campaign for, is it Tsuru? For Tsuru, for Solidarity, and is also active in Tsuru Healing Circles, Healing Arts, and work supporting a Vietnamese immigrant in fighting deportation. She's a longtime student of Sogetsu Ikebana and teaches a class at JSA, a Bay Area Senior and Community Center. Without further ado, Keiko Kubo.
Hi, is this on? Can you hear me? Great. So I also want to say that I'm a longtime supporter of Pan Valley, and I'm really honored to be here with you today. And so for the past 5 years or so, I've been involved with this group called Suru for Solidarity. Suru is a Japanese word for crane, and this group was started by Japanese Americans who were kids in the World War II camps, and their descendants and allies to fight child and family detention. What we say is that no one came for us, and there's a small exception for some individual Quakers and Quaker organizations, but largely the world was silent when we were taken. And so we say we're not going to be silent while history's repeating itself. And it seems to be a narrative that changes the way people think about it, seeing people holding up pictures of themselves as children behind barbed wire, saying it's just not okay. And so that's our focus. As you've observed and seen, there are connections between policies that drove our Japanese American experiences during World War II and with the ones that are happening now and affecting people. And so I decided to try to share about our World War II experience by talking about my family's, both my father's and my mother's families' experiences a little bit, which means I won't cover everything because this is a huge story, but I'll try to do it in a way that might be kind of similar to my relationship with America. As was mentioned, I was born in Detroit to a mother who was paroled out of a camp called Topaz in Utah, and to a father who was paroled out of a camp called Poston 2, which was in Arizona. And they met at a social event in Detroit. So the U.S. policy that drove these circumstances was one that worked to keep Japanese Americans from returning to the West Coast to establish communities. And it was pretty successful, right? There are these small pockets of us in different parts of Ohio, Detroit, Chicago, people in New York and New Jersey, where folks did not get back to the West Coast. And that was the case for my family, too. So before the end of the war, Japanese Americans were required to have sponsors east of the restricted areas of the country. And my father's sponsors were a Jewish family who owned a construction company in Detroit. And actually, I'm not sure about who my mom's sponsors were. I vaguely heard that she went to Philadelphia to be a housekeeper and then ended up in Detroit, but that's just what I've heard. I really don't know. I don't have any facts behind that right now. And my family moved to a suburb of Detroit in 1958 to live catty-corner from another Japanese American family. So I can remember being a kid. We had a 2-story house, and my sister and I would sit on the landing after we were supposed to be in bed, hearing the adults talk about camp. So the words dust would come up, dust, because that's one of the things that is known about the camps. Like the barracks were built out of new wood, so it shrunk. And so the dust came into their houses too. And we hear that over and over again. They talked about filling bags with straw to make mattresses. And so I just want to say, because of the work that I did as a student in the late 1970s, as well as work in the community, I've always kind of paid attention to questions and issues that have arisen around Japanese American and the World War II experience. And my long commitment to the American Friends Service Committee is based on an interview that I did with the widow of painter Chihiro Obata, Haruko Obata, who actually was a renowned Ikebana artist herself. But she told me about Quakers serving coffee in Berkeley near the buses where her family was loaded to go to the Assembly Center at Tanforan Racetrack. So I've been in and out of frustration with the AFSC over the years, but I've stuck with it. And largely actually because of that conversation with Haruko Obata. So there's a connection for me that's personal around all of this and the connection with PVI. So I had a flash of understanding while I was working on the NEH grant, realizing that I was born and grew up in Detroit only because of the camps. And coming to grips with the impact of our community's incarceration has been challenging for Japanese Americans like me. I mean, sometimes it feels like a treasure hunt, right? Collecting information and not doing it based on memory, but by various experiences. And I'm going to share a few of those with you. It's almost like a treasure hunt for individuals of us and groups of us and for the community as a whole. So somehow I'd heard that my father's brother, my Uncle Henry, had been in the Crystal City Department of Justice camp during World War II, which is in Texas. So I went to the first Crystal City pilgrimage in 2018, and I was surprised to see my grandfather's name in a listing of detainees at Crystal City. And so growing up in Detroit, I hadn't known my grandparents. They had passed away in the early 50s. And it turns out that Crystal City was also held thousands of Japanese Latins that were brought from South America and Central America. There were 13 countries, I think, but mostly they were from Peru. And I have another funny story about that. When my friend Peter and I were doing research in the 70s at UCLA, we found a Japanese Spanish newsletter from Crystal City, but neither one of us had read Japanese or Spanish. So we made up all kinds of crazy stories about it, and it wasn't until I read Michiko Wegland's book in the 80s that I found out about the Japanese Latins, and said, oh, that's what that newsletter was about. And then in Crystal City, met many of the folks that were either from that group of people that were captured from Peru and their descendants. And I actually, through my kids' elementary school, knew some Peruvians and practiced Peruvian New Year's things with them. And I gotta say, the Japanese Peruvians are very lively. They're really Peruvian in a lot of ways. It's really exciting. So I wanna go on that in June of 2020, Suited for Solidarity, which is the group that I work with, planned to create the largest gathering of Japanese Americans since World War II in Washington, D.C., and the plan was to hang 120,000 or 125,000 cranes on the White House fence, kind of representing each of the people that was in the camps at that time. And there's a man named Duncan Ryuku Williams, who's a Buddhist leader and a professor of religious studies at USC. He wanted to read the names of each of the 125,000 people that we were honoring at that event, and he was really shocked to learn that there was no such list in existence. So he got funding to create the list and has successfully created a book called the Erecho Book of Names with closer to 129,000 names. And families and the public in general are able to place dots under the names of people in the Erecho. And while looking through my family's entries in the Erecho in 1923 and 24 with my siblings, we learned that our grandparents and my Uncle Henry's family were incarcerated in Crystal City, which was an institution created to hold families for exchange with Japan and to a lesser extent, Italy and Germany, for US citizens caught abroad in those countries during the war. I also learned that my uncle had spent time through looking at the Erecho in other Department of Justice camps. And I'll be going to a memorial unveiling in Bismarck in September, which was one of the places he was incarcerated at Fort Lincoln during the war. And that's kind of exciting. It's the building where they were held is on a Native American college now, and the biggest powwow in the world is held in September there. And so we're going to be going to that powwow in addition to be going to the memorial unveiling. And I've told the stories from this personal point of view to illustrate the basis of Sudu's commitment to say never again is now, just stop repeating history. We in Sudu work to create and support intergenerational healing for Japanese Americans. We believe that knowing our history and examining its impact on ourselves today will help us as individuals and as a community, and that in healing ourselves, we'll be more effective in doing the work to stop repeating history and supporting other folks moving forward. I just have a couple more things to say. As a co-chair of the Child and Family Detention Campaign for SUDU, my work has been, and has included working with La Resistencia in Seattle, Tacoma to close the GeoCorps-run ICE Detention Center, and now we're working with the ICE Out of Dublin Coalition to keep ICE from reopening a women's federal prison as a detention center. SUDU's organizing a rally in a park in Dublin with taiko drumming, art tables for kids and others, and a program featuring a number of speakers, and it's going to be next week on Sunday. We incorporate to work both healing and arts in all our work. So I just feel a definite connection between our work and the work of PVI and the artivism people. And and I just want to close to say this is a big story that's made up of an accumulation of a lot of stories. And there's no way that I could actually address all of those stories in this 15 minutes, but we can talk about that some more too if you want. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Keiko, for sharing with us. Our second panelist is Patient Milrod. Patient has been a lawyer in Fresno since 1980. Her legal work has included civil rights actions against police agencies and on behalf of plaintiffs challenging discrimination in housing, employment, and healthcare. Her current work with and for community-based organizations include policy advocacy and litigation, focusing on equitable access to decent housing and healthcare. Having served as the executive director of Central California Legal Services between 2017 and 2022, she is again in private practice. She has a master's degree in public policy from Cornell University and lives in the Tower District with her husband, Paul Pierce. Patient and Paul are members of Temple Beth Israel's Reformed Jewish congregation. Thank you.
I'm going to stand up. I'm too short to see everybody from a seated place. I'm honored to be here today. I am really honored to sit at this table with these amazing humans, and so thank you very much for including me. My job is to talk about civil rights in a not such a personal way, although it's hard not to talk about civil rights in a personal way. So indulge me a little bit. A lot of what I may start with, you're going to say, yeah, I knew that, but we'll go past that really quickly. So civil rights, just so we're all on the same page, are the freedoms the Constitution guarantees to people who live in the United States, not just citizens, everybody. And civil rights are guaranteed to us. It doesn't matter where we were born, what our race is, our sex, our gender, our sexual orientation, none of that matters. We're all entitled to civil rights, theoretically. The Constitution prescribes equal treatment for everyone with respect to public services, public education, access to law enforcement that protects us rather than persecutes us, and fair treatment in the courts, especially due process before we are deprived of our liberty or our property. And so we often use the term civil rights as a shorthand for movements that those of us with enough gray hair will remember were starting up and came to public notice in the 60s and 70s. Those include the movement for Black liberation, the Black Panthers, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, all the way up to Black Lives Matter, and hundreds of other related organizations. The Chicano movement, think about Cesar Chavez's United Farm Workers, again, founded on and built on decades of those communities' active resistance that had preceded the United Farm Worker Movement. The Stonewall Uprising, which was a 1969 riot where people resisted a police raid on a gay bar, and that really sparked the movement to ensure equal rights to LGBTQ people. The organized campaign for indigenous rights, and that includes the American Indian movements. And we heard a couple of the occupation of Alcatraz Island in the middle of San Francisco Bay, which had been a federal prison, and additional organizations that originated from that effort and that were coalitions with that effort and that continue to exist today. I'm not going to omit the second wave of feminism, plus the coalitions of disability rights activists who have transformed our public spaces in significant ways, and our public education system also enabled to secure better access, although it's far from perfect. So the Constitution lays out this principle of equal treatment. And I just went through enumerated these ways that the struggle for equal treatment has taken forms historically within the last century. But really all of this has been reliant on and dependent on this guarantee in the Constitution of the United States. Few problems with this. One is that the Constitution itself is you can use it as a basis for a claim, but it doesn't prescribe remedies, and much of those remedies, like how do you fix it? If you've been screwed, if you've been treated wrong, how do you fix that? Well, those remedies are generally contained in federal and state and local laws. Problem number two, laws don't enforce themselves. So, the law is on a piece of paper, it's in a book, it's pixels on a screen, but it doesn't jump out of the screen and rectify whatever it is, whatever problem that has been created by people's bigotry. So a lot of times, well, usually, laws are useful, are helpful, only if there is political will to enforce them. And right at this moment, we are seeing a pretty sad failure of political will to enforce equal rights. In fact, we're seeing a political will to roll back equal rights and impair people's rights. And, if that were the end of the story, I would just have to curl up and die. So I don't think we're here in this room to consider that the end of the story. So I want to keep us mindful of the fact that this is not a new story in the United States. This crap that's going on right now, this is not new. So I'm going to take a few minutes to put our present moment in context. I want to talk a little bit about recognizing our own place in this struggle at this point in time. And in particular, I want to recall and honor and take inspiration from John R. Lewis, who was the Georgia congressman who died almost a year ago, July 17th, and talk a little bit about how and why Congressman Lewis's example can help us right now. So first, we have been here before. America has a long history of xenophobia and intolerance and bigotry that has taken legal forms as well as social forms. So 1863, there were draft riots in New York City. The Irish population rioted against the black population because the Irishmen were angry that they were going to get drafted to fight in the Civil War, which everybody perceived as being about slavery, which it was. And the Irishmen were like, hell no, I don't want to go and be drafted for that. There were 120 deaths. The colored orphan asylum was burned to the ground. I mean, it was really a serious assault on black people's civil rights. And in this instance, the American Army went in and they actually quelled the disturbance, but not in time to prevent death and destruction. In 1880s, there was a Chinese Exclusion Act that we just heard about. Of course, Chinese folks had been brought to the United States to work in the gold rush, to work in mining, to build the railroads. That was in the 1850s and 60s. By the 1880s, they were all of a sudden, they were becoming part of the American society, and there were a lot of folks that had a lot of problems with that, and there were anti-Chinese riots. And there was, this will sound familiar, there was a journalistic, all the newspapers of the era were like, oh my God, the yellow peril, and ginned up huge public fear, which turned into riots, which provided the kind of political will that Congress needed to pass the Exclusion Act, which went into effect in 1892, I believe, 1882, and barred Chinese immigration until 1902. In 1890s, there was a Pullman strike. The Pullman workers were essentially captives of their employer. They lived in Pullman property, they bought groceries from a Pullman store, they were paid by the Pullman company, there was a downturn, their wages got cut, but none of their expenditures and payments out to the Pullman company were reduced. They tried to go on strike. This time the American Army intervened and crushed the strike, not until there had been significant interference with the railway traffic. Pullman cars were these super luxurious train cars, sort of like Air Force One on wheels. And so here these workers were making these extremely luxurious cars for these very rich people, and they were starving effectively. And this was characteristic of the labor movement. There were a number of mine workers tried to organize, railway workers tried to organize, and what they found was that they were greeted by not just Pinkertons, it was a sort of private army of security people who were pretty ruthless and against whom there were none of the Pinkertons ever got prosecuted for beating people to death or shooting them or otherwise crushing the strikes with violence. But also the American Army was called out on numerous occasions on behalf of the corporations in order to quash the efforts to organize. So in the Pullman strike, President Cleveland sent in federal troops to crush the strike, which sounds eerily and uncomfortably familiar. News reports and editorials commonly depicted the strikers as foreigners. The editors warned of mobs and aliens and anarchy and defiance of the law. So it was a kind of a similar rhetoric to what we're seeing now. In 1914, World War I labor shortages meant that Mexican workers were invited into the United States. In 1917, German Americans were interned during World War I, which echoes of what was to occur later, or not echoes, but a precedent for what was to occur later in World War II that involved Italians and Germans as well as Japanese. 1929 to 39, during the Great Depression, those Mexican workers who had come in to help out during World War I, all of a sudden everybody's going, oh my God, how are we gonna work? These Mexican workers are getting our jobs and they're taking the public benefits that are being made available by the government to cure the Depression, and so we better get rid of them. So what happened during this period, in the 30s and early 40s, was the same kind of sweeps that we are seeing now, the same kind of federal government, military, and administrative interference in human life, and hundreds of, let's see, how many? Up to 2 million Mexicans and Mexican American citizens. Apparently, up between 60 and 70% of the people who were deported in these sweeps were citizens of the United States. So we're listening right now going, what the hell? Are taking citizens out. But yeah, this is not new. This is a thing, and it's something that the government has done in the past. Apparently 1/3 of LA's Mexican population was expelled between 1929 and 1944. And then, of course, in 1942, as Keiko has eloquently explained to us, there was the Executive Order 9066, which created concentration camps for Japanese residents and American citizens of Japanese extraction. When Keiko just said that, sorry, her mother and father were paroled out of camp, what that means is they did not regain their liberty. It was conditional. That's what parole means. We're letting you out, but only because you have a sponsor and there's going to be somebody monitoring you to make sure you don't misbehave. Which, I mean, it's better than being in the camp, but it's still not an acceptable control of your liberty. And it was undertaken, of course, without due process and entirely based on racial profiling, and in the same way that the current enforcement efforts, I use the term advisedly, are based on racial profiling, and effectively with the intent of accomplishing ethnic cleansing, right? Make America great again means make America white again, and this is part of that effort. In 1942, we had the Racero program, which was, again, oh gosh, we have all these workers who have gone off to be soldiers in World War II. We better bring in some Mexicans to come and help us do our farm work and other labor that our soldiers were doing before they went to the war. And then, surprise, surprise, by 1953, there is Operation, I apologize for using this word, but it was the word that they used, Operation Wetback, which was, the purpose of which was to return Mexicans to Mexico. And naturally, like all of these efforts, it was not restricted to people who were actually Mexican nationals, but it was, again, a matter of sweeps and workplace raids and all of the kinds of things that we're seeing now, factories, farms, other workplaces. The Border Patrol, the head of the Border Patrol in 1953 was a guy named Harlan B. Carter. So he was actually a convicted murderer. He had killed a Latino teenager in 1931, but like, why should that be a problem, right? He later headed the National Rifle Association, but he personally objected to the large number of Mexican immigrants, both legal and not, in the United States, and he undertook these huge sweeps and, again, an effort at ethnic cleansing in 1953 and 54. In 1954 alone, 1.1 million people were returned to Mexico, and of course, as now, many people citizens of Mexican descent, but also people who were here, who weren't born here from Mexico, left without, like, they obeyed in advance, right? They left before they could be apprehended. So, first, as I said, this is nothing new. Good to know, not encouraging, but good to know. We have a long and shameful history of xenophobia and bigotry, of politicians and media pandering to the ugliest layer of bottom feeders in the United States, law enforcement trampling civil rights. And here we're not only talking about access to public education and whatnot, we're talking about rights, your right to liberty, the right to be free of bodily harm without due process. I mean, really, the kinds of bodily harm the government can legitimately inflict on you are extremely limited, and we don't see any kind of self-control being demonstrated right now. And the courts are falling into line to some degree. So that yesterday, the birthright citizenship issue, we have a new ruling from a lower federal court, this time saying, oh, you brought a class action. Okay, I can grant, the federal judge can grant a nationwide injunction ensuring and protecting birthright citizenship in a class action case, because that was a loophole that the recent Supreme Court case left. And immediately upon issuing of that case, like within hours, some folks filed a class action, bless their hearts, and got a ruling already. So we'll see what the Supreme Court does with it, but I raise it because it shows that the courts are not totally falling into line, and there's chinks in their armor, and we'll have to see how it plays out. So the result, of course, is that communities and families are torn apart, lives are changed forever. Keiko was born in Detroit because her family members had been uprooted from their own communities and had been transported somewhere else. They had no plans to go. And that's happening over and over and over again for many, many, many people. And I'm choosing to decide that the bigger picture can give us strength and inspiration. So Frederick Douglass reminded us that if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Power concedes nothing without a demand. So that's our work. That's our work. We bear in mind the men and women who peacefully demanded their rights to a living wage, to equal treatment, to freedom from persecution, who peacefully stood up to tanks and bulldozers, to Pinkerton men and federal troops, to club and gun-wielding vigilantes, thugs and bigots. So it's our job, and thank you to the artivists, to raise our voice, to make the demand that the government enforce and respect the civil rights the Constitution grants us, not just for ourselves, but for our brothers and sisters, for our friends and neighbors, for everyone over whom the Constitution spreads its protective wings. That's everybody. We know in advance, though, that this is a process. You know, when Frederick Douglass made his statement in 1857, he didn't know there was going to be a civil war. He didn't know there would be an Emancipation Proclamation. He knew this was a fight he'd been fighting for years and years, and his forebears before him and his family during his own lifetime. So recognizing it's a process, to me, that's helpful. It means, so my name is Patience. It doesn't fit me at all. Normally, I'm like, can we get this done already? So it reminds me to understand there's a long game here, and then that's the game we have to be playing. But we also know we can't stop. One protest, no. Two protests, no. This is a demand that must be made over and over and over and over again. We have to demand in new and different ways. We have to demand to new and different audiences. We have to make alliances and coalitions with new and different people. We have to demand of our politicians, our media, our schools, our places of worship, our businesses, our families, our friends, our neighbors. We know that in making this demand, we're going to encounter hostility and indifference and sometimes violence. Nevertheless, we will persist. So finally, I invite you to make this demand and to join me in invoking the memory and model of John Lewis, to remember his urging us to never stop making good trouble, necessary trouble, in order to achieve change and protect our civil rights. I invite you with me to prepare ourselves to cross our own version of Selma, Alabama's Edmund Pettus Bridge, to prepare ourselves to face those heavily armed sheriff's deputies who are inching to beat us back, to understand that even a setback is an investment in progress, that even a setback helps us pave the way for those who follow, ever making the same demand for justice. So find a way to make this demand, to raise your voice. This is so much easier than it was 20 years ago. So every single one of us, I'm asking you, at least every week, every day would be better. Write a postcard, make a phone call, send an email, join a protest. On the 17th, there is a Good Trouble Lives On protest in honor of John Lewis. So goodtroubleliveson.org. There's at least one protest here in Fresno. There might be one in Clovis, which would blow my mind and blow their minds too. But the one in Fresno is at Eaton Plaza downtown. So don't just bemoan this shit. Sorry for the language. Like, do something about it. And you can do something about it. It may not feel like anything. It may feel like, but you know what? It's like, so my whole life has been spent making things difficult and expensive for people to do the wrong thing. And sometimes you see that there's an outcome and sometimes there's not. But we all have a store of granitos de arena, that like grains of sand that we can put and encourage everyone else to contribute. And that's our job, to not lose sight of the long view, to understand that we've been here before and things can change and will change, but they will only change if we do it together. So please, join me.
Thank you, Patience. We appreciate you sharing with us. Our third panelist is Brenda Ordaz Garcia. Brenda Ordaz was born in Ensenada, Baja California, Mexico, and is the daughter of Zapoteco farm workers. Her early years were shaped by constant migration until her family settled in Madera, California, when she was 11 years old. As a DACA recipient, Brenda has been a passionate advocate for immigrant rights for over a decade. She currently serves as the Community Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, where she empowers and uplifts immigrant communities through education, advocacy, and engagement. With you, Brenda.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. So honored to be here with this group of women that have definitely used their power, have used their voice for the good of our communities. Thank you to Pan Valley for inviting me. I have been a part of Pan Valley for many years. I was one of the first in the first fellowships, and then throughout the years collaborating in different capacities. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be here. I'm very honored to share with all of these women. So before I get started, I know it's warm outside and it's fresh in here, so if you want to stretch or if you need to stand up, please feel free to do so. Listen to your bodies. These topics are heavy, and if you need to stand or walk out, feel free to do that. I will not be offended. So before I get started, I want to ask all of you to please close your eyes for a minute. Don't fall asleep, because then Mirna will have a talk with me after, but just close your eyes for a minute and think about living in a place for many years, right? You live in this place, this is your life, this is where you call home, but having to know that no matter how much you contribute, how deeply you contribute, how deep your roots go, or how much you sacrifice, you will never belong, right? So this is the feeling that a lot of DACA recipients, you can open your eyes now, please don't go sleep. This is a feeling that a lot of DACA recipients, a lot of our immigrant community feels on our day-to-day lives, right? As Gina shared, I am a DACA recipient, I am undocumented. DACA is like a pause and play button that only allows me to be here in the country, but does not give me or many, close to 1 million other youth that arrived here as children the opportunity to travel outside of the U.S., for example, freely. We have to ask for advanced parole or a special permit to be able to travel or to go outside of the country. So That is a reality for many DACA, but also for the undocumented community who is here fully undocumented. And it's also a reality that has been faced by many other communities in the history of the U.S., you know, first Native Americans, the Japanese, the Armenians, the Latinos, the Braceros, the Mexicans, right? So it's a part of America's history to have this sort of exclusion, right? So that the communities that don't look like you, that don't represent what they view as America as, right? So to them, America is white, America is blue-eyed, America is English. And if you don't fit into that kind of box, then you are othered, then you are someone that just is not welcomed here, and we never get that sense of belonging. And I think that Pan Valley has done a great job of really building spaces to create that sense of belongings for our communities. And again, I want you to look around the room today and see how we have such a diverse group in here. And all of you carry power with you, right? So all of us have power within us. We all have privilege. All of us that are in this room today carry a privilege over many, many people in this country that don't necessarily have that. And that is, for example, the undocumented or the documented community. So two different moments in time, right? The times of the Japanese Exclusion Act, Order 966, and the moments that we are living here today. But it's the same struggle. We're struggling for recognition, for rights, for humanity, right? We're struggling for them to recognize our humanity. So, as Keiko mentioned, over 120,000 Japanese American people were rounded up and they were placed in internment camps. These people were taken from their homes. They were taken from what they believed to be their home, and it was simply because of their ancestry. And this was legal, right? This was accepted. This was America. Fast forward to today, that's where we are again, at the same spot again, right? Just yesterday, an undocumented farm worker died at one of the raids that happened in Camarillo. We have things like the Lincoln-Riley Act, right, that aims to not only end the due process for our communities, but also it discriminates against our communities. We have things like the birthright citizenship that patients spoke about. We have things that are a direct attack to our communities. So myself as DACA, or sometimes they call us dreamers, right, because it's cute. Oh, they're dreamers, so cute. But that's not the reality, right? We've been forced to resist. We've been forced to be resilient. And a lot of times we hear as an adjective, oh, the Latino community is so resilient. Oh my gosh, yay for them. But I think that being resilient is not a good thing. It means that you've had to struggle. It means that there's so many things that we have to overcome, right? So I don't want my children to be resilient because I don't want them to have to go through all the things that I went through, right? So, well, yes, being resilient is a strong characteristic. It's not necessarily a good thing for a group or a community to go through that. So, as a DACA recipient, when I learned about the Japanese Exclusion Act, I saw my own story in the shadow, right? Because the same policies of fear and discrimination, the same legal barriers just justified by racism, and the same resilience that requires to survive it all, right? So as Keiko shared the story of her parents, I think that myself, my community, my family very much shares that sentiment. So about my own journey, I came to the U.S. when I was 11 years old. My parents are originally from Oaxaca, Mexico, an indigenous group of the Zapoteco region. However, because of the economic situation in their state, they migrated to Baja California, where I was born in Ensenada. At the age of 11, my father had been migrating back and forth from the border town of Baja California to the Central Valley to work and then go back home. But because things changed with IRCA and IRA and all of these new immigration policies, it was more difficult for him to go and come back. So we ended up migrating our whole family to the U.S. So I've been in the U.S. since 2003, and it's now 2025, right? And I've had DACA since 2013. And I think just not being able to have that certainty is very difficult. Not only for me, but I know that many other DACA recipients share kind of that same sentiment of when are we going to be enough, right? And it's very difficult. So Sorry. So what I feel right now in this moment is that the U.S. has done this same kind of tactic, right, on many groups. Like I said, the Native Americans, the Japanese, the Chinese, the Armenians. And then, for example, for the Japanese, it took them 60 years to go back and apologize and say, hey, sorry about that, we messed up, you know? And so history repeats itself. And I think that having these events like we are here today is very important, because if we don't bring this up, if we don't remember history, it will repeat itself, and that's exactly what is happening, and it has happened for the majority of the life of this country. So I think that as a DACA recipient and as an undocumented person in this country, I'm not just asking for permission to stay, I'm asking for the chance to live, to be seen, and to be heard. And I want us to learn from the past and not dwell in that shame, but to rise in courage. And I think that the Japanese Exclusion Act, it wasn't just a historical event, it was a mirror and a warning for us. And I think we're in that moment, right, where it has come time again. And I ask of all of you to stand with our communities, not only today, but for the future. And really use your privilege, use your power, as I have chosen to use my power to be here today and speak to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Our last panelist is Jessica Smith Bobadilla. Jessica owns a full-service immigration law firm founded in 2007 by herself. Prior to having her own practice, Jessica worked in government and in human rights. She worked for the United States Department of Commerce, the United Nations Development Program, and Human Rights Watch in various roles as a law clerk and consultant. She also worked on Wall Street for a firm that specialized in business immigration, asylum law, removal defense, and appellate litigation. Jessica serves clients in many states and throughout the world. Her original office is still in Fresno, California, in the historic downtown area, close to the courts and immigration agencies. And it's also just a few blocks away from the area where her paternal grandparents made their home after arriving in the United States as refugees following the Armenian genocide. Jessica also maintains offices in San Francisco, Oakland, and Los Angeles. She has the capacity to meet with and handle cases in other jurisdictions such as New York, Chicago, Denver, Phoenix, and Boston. Due to her practice of 23 years and her strong record of success in handling cases, Jessica regularly travels to jurisdictions throughout the United States to assist clients with immigration needs. She has been cited in Forbes, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Mother Jones, the Fresno Bee, and has also been featured on television and radio programs such as Telemundo, Univision, NBC News, ABC News, CNN, ESPN, and NPR. Apart from many hardworking families, Jessica has represented businesses and high-profile immigrants, including DACA Olympian Luis Grijalba. She is fluent in English and Spanish and is proficient in French and speaks elementary Armenian. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I hope, is this on? And can you hear me okay? Okay, thank you. Well, thank you all for coming. This is really important. I think that I was born in Fresno. My dad is here. He was born in Fresno. And I think, we do have an immigrant and refugee past in our family that made immigration law more of a natural fit for me after I went to law school rather than necessarily a choice. And I was lucky to grow up here around such a diverse and vibrant mix of immigrant communities. And I think it's really important, all the Know Your Rights and all of those types of trainings that are going on to protect people like my clients and many members of our community. But I think it's also important that we look at the bigger picture of what's happening and the erosion of protections in our system. So with respect to kind of the silencing of due process, just to kind of break down what, some of the definitions of due process are, is that, due process is the idea that it's a protection from the arbitrary exercise or the unfair exercise of government power against individual citizens and individuals in general, not just U.S. citizens. The due process rights, I think, as many of you know, are in the 5th and 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. And one important point to note in relation to what I do, which is representation of immigrants and refugees before federal agencies and federal courts, is that the Supreme Court and the federal courts of appeal have decided over time through their decisions that even non-citizens in removal proceedings and subject to exercises of government authority do have a right to Fifth Amendment due process rights during those proceedings. Some of those things at the most basic level, those are like notice, proper notice of a hearing and your right to counsel, even though in removal proceedings and for immigrants, that's not court-appointed counsel in most cases. Some other things that go kind of hand in hand with due process are this idea of the rule of law, right? That there are certain constraints on government power, that there's an open government in the sense that there's transparency, that there's a clearly announced set of rules, and that everyone is supposed to be subject to them, that there's fundamental rights, like the civil rights that patients discussed, and that there's also a civil and criminal justice system that is fair and transparent and functioning. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. I know many people are interested in kind of what procedures ICE follows. So I've been practicing for 23 years, and as the introduction mentioned, I've been in a lot of different jurisdictions. But I do have to say that in these last few months, I've seen more of a departure from due process than I'd seen under any of the prior administrations, Republican or Democrat, or including under the first Trump administration. There's a couple different things that I'll discuss that relate to that, but traditionally I just want to kind of go through. I know that we've seen a lot of headlines recently with very random enforcement, and I did not find that kind of random enforcement. I know that maybe some people think, well, that was going on, it just wasn't publicized. Really not. In my 23 years of practice in different states, we didn't see agents pull up to a field and start terrorizing random workers and chasing them. And we didn't see, them, rushing into the back of restaurants and, start arresting people that were working in a kitchen. And we've seen that in the last few months. So I just want to say for the record that I do think there's been a departure in the procedures, and I think it's been increasingly chaotic and dangerous, both for federal government officials that are being sent into these situations and for, average U.S. citizens and for undocumented people that might be the target of these enforcement operations. Typically, when ICE would take someone into custody, I'd also have found throughout administrations and throughout different jurisdictions that I practiced in or had clients, going forward before these agencies in, that the right to counsel, if the client asserted the right to counsel or the right not to ask questions further, the right to kind of remain silent in a way, even though it's not a criminal proceeding when they're in ICE custody, it's a civil proceeding, an administrative proceeding. Generally, that was honored. I found a departure from that recently, and I found it in some cases where I'm sure that the person knew to ask for me because they had been representing them for 10 years. I'm also sure that the agents knew that I was representing them because my representation forms are all over their alien file. And, some particularly kind of troubling cases where people also needed their medication and were still forced to go forward without me, where they were told I was called and I wasn't called, and then said, well, now you have to go forward because I'm not coming. And so those type of things, I have to say, prior administrations, even Trump 1, the first administration, we didn't see that. And we're seeing that now. Some other things that have been done to kind of erode due process rights and silence people is, many of you probably heard that the administration canceled a legal assistance program that would give representation in immigration court to 26,000 unaccompanied minors. So that means without the nonprofits that are kind of trying to hold down, now they had too many cases, now trying to hold down way too many cases with limited funding, that funding from the federal government is gone. Now, there's been some intervening court activity, but those are the kind of things that at least the administration intends to fully implement to get in the way. And it's one thing if you say, well, an adult who comes here or who lets their visa expire, comes here without the right documents, maybe doesn't have the right to representation unless they pay for it, but or they can find the services of a nonprofit. But a child, sitting before a judge, very young children many times, that just doesn't seem to be a process that would either help the courts administer the system, right, properly, or definitely protect the rights of children, no matter where they're from. Some other things that are going on that I thought would be of interest to people is that the government has increasingly, through partly executive order of President Trump, has expanded their use of something called expedited removal. Expedited removal is something that came into practice in about 1996 and allowed government agents to remove people without a hearing, usually at a border. It was almost always at a border, occasionally at an airport. Most of those cases were originally people that had committed some form of fraud or misrepresented something about their history or were believed to. Not in all cases was that actually true, but that was the idea behind the law. Those orders carry a ban of either 5 to 10 years and are not appealable. They're not subject to judicial review by any court. So that was what was unusual when that first came into being, that a judge cannot review that order. And it's almost like a red light towards any other options for the person, even if they've done nothing wrong or are trying to come back to the country legally later. The government's expanded that recently, and some of the chaotic or kind of crazy scenes you've probably seen on video in courthouses have to do with asylum cases, primarily asylum cases for people that have entered, who have been paroled in a sense, or allowed in to pursue their asylum cases within the last 2 years. At court hearings, the government has increasingly, the government attorneys that are employees of the Department of Homeland Security have asked judges to dismiss the court documents, so just dismiss the case, right, against this person. In some cases, dismissal of a case against a non-citizen is a good thing because sometimes they have other options before other agencies, or one of their children, is a certain age that they might have options in a year or two. In this case, what's occurring is they're asking the judge to dismiss the case against the non-citizen, and the individual or family steps out into the hallway, and now because there's nothing pending, ICE is taking custody and doing expedited removal, which basically bars them for 5 or 10 years. So if that's not an erosion of due process or the silencing of due process, I don't know what is. I've consulted with clients that objected, during the proceeding and said, no, I don't want my case dismissed. I'm afraid to live in Colombia or to live in, Mexico or Guatemala or wherever, and I need to have this case heard. In the cases that I've heard of, the government has insisted that they have the right to decide who to proceed against. It's a form of discretion or prosecutorial discretion as they're presenting it, and the judges in all the cases that I've heard have dismissed the proceedings. So this is really part of what's creating the crazy scenes and dangerous scenes in many cases that we've seen in courthouses nationwide, immigration courts nationwide recently. So, the right to counsel has also been kind of abridged in other ways. A number of law firms after the Trump administration came in, different types of law firms, they weren't all immigration related, but different things, received a letter from the administration or some type of communication, and this was so widespread that the American Bar Association brought suit and also issued statements saying that they believed that, that there was an attempt to silence people's due process rights by intimidating counsel that may not be favorable towards the Trump administration or its objectives, including immigration. So that's another example. The administration also issued an executive order not long ago threatening people like me, basically saying that we will be investigated, we'll be sanctioned, we'll be prosecuted, that they will do many things to, make it difficult for us, more difficult. So there's definitely, a widespread, effort to interfere with counsel, which obviously immigration law is complicated, right? Many areas of law are complicated. I wouldn't even try to dabble without patient's advice into a civil rights lawsuit because it's so different and it's so complicated. So to think that people without counsel or with all these hurdles now to access their counsel and to get the right to counsel could have any chance of prevailing, I mean, forget language barriers, just the legal barriers, is just kind of ridiculous. I don't want to talk too much, but I probably already have, but I did want to mention the case of Kilmar Abrego, or Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia is his full name. He's a Salvadorian man who was removed on March 15th, 2025, according to what the administration later characterized as administrative error. I don't think it was administrative error, and I have a specific reason for that. I think it was administrative incompetence. There is a order. Kilmar Abrego received something called withholding of removal because he and his family were able to prove that they had a sufficient, that it was more likely than not that they would be targeted by MS-13 and other criminal organizations in El Salvador. I have clients that have withholding of removal, and the way it works procedurally is the judge enters a removal order, but then enters another order that's side by side that withholds the removal of that individual to that country. So I believe it was complete incompetence because someone saw a removal order and didn't look at all the orders or didn't really check. Many of you know there's been a confused chain of events with every court pretty much, up to the Supreme Court being involved. And eventually the Supreme Court said that the administration needed to facilitate Mr. Abrego's return. The government's main argument was that they didn't have control over him anymore because he was incarcerated in El Salvador. What was particularly ridiculous was when the Salvadorian president, Bukele, was visiting the White House, he basically said the same thing. So apparently no one had control of him, even though he had been administratively removed to El Salvador, which was his birth country. What's particularly troubling about that, too, is that withholding of removal is given if it's proved that it's more likely than not that someone would suffer harm in that country. So the government not only committed error, but removed someone, to the exact country, not where maybe they had, left for some other reason, but had proved up through due process and through a case that to an immigration judge that they had a bona fide fear of living in that country. So now we're in a position where the government did bring Mr. Abrego back. They charged him with human trafficking, which does not appear to really be substantiated. He's currently in custody in Maryland, and the judge that is presiding over his case was considering release, but his lawyers expressed concern that he would possibly be, the government's expressed a desire to deport him again, possibly to a third country, which recently the Supreme Court says is okay. So Kilmar Abrego's in custody as of today because the judge ruled on, I believe, June 27th, that she was going to continue to hold him in custody for his own protection. That's his own protection from the U.S. government from further detention. So these kind of confused scenarios are also a big sign that due process and the rule of law are not being honored and being followed. So I'd just like to share that in one of the cases where my client was questioned without me, one of the clients that actually needed medication too, and I'd been representing for 10 years. When we went to court on that case, I objected to all the documents that were statements that were taken without me present, even though, not necessarily, anything that was that different than what was in the file, but I felt it was important to ask to suppress those documents. So the judge asked me what my end game was with that. And I felt like saying the right to counsel and due process are the end game. And I think that's important because I thought that. I didn't say it because I thought it sounded like sarcastic, but I did think it. And I think it's important that we push for due process even when we're not sure it matters and even when we're not sure it affects us directly. Because in the Abrego case, when the government was arguing that they couldn't get Mr. Abrego back from El Salvador, which they eventually did, Justice Sotomayor in the decision, or maybe this was oral argument, commented that then that would allow our government to deport and incarcerate any person, including U.S. citizens, without legal consequence, so long as it could do so before a court can intervene. So I just urge all of you to keep, thank you for coming today. I know this is a rest day for most people, and just keep following these issues. Let's keep pressuring, our elected representatives and keep the pressure on, because that does change outcomes. Maybe not immediately, but it will change outcomes. And we are all protecting due process by pushing for these protections even when we're not sure of the exact end game or why it matters. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our panelists. Please, another round of applause for all of them. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, your stories, your recommendations as well. We're going to move into the Q&A. Josh, is there a little pause or we move right into the Q&A? Right into. Okay, so we're going to open up the space for dialogue. I want to also invite actors. I know you guys are comfortable over there, but if you can join us over here so to be a part of the conversation. And so we're going to open it up to the audience. And if anybody has a question or a comment that you might want to pose, please feel free to raise your hand. I'll bring the microphone to you. And we can have a little bit of a talk. You guys want to just grab chairs and get it over here. Any questions or comments or anything that you might want to hear some more of? We also sometimes need a moment to digest, right? So much information. Yes, we have a comment over here.
Yes, so my question is this. It's my understanding from the New York Times that Stephen Miller has enormous power. He's also in charge of the Justice Department. And so it almost seems like we have sort of a Bull Connor type moment. And I'm just wondering how we should politically deal with him.
Thank you. Is anybody in the panel would like to respond to that?
Well, it's tempting to think we ought to deal with him extrajudicially, but I'm not suggesting that. This is sort of the quintessential problem, right? Is this guy, nobody elected him. He has his position because the president has put him there, and the president allows him free reign, and nobody's saying no to him. The people who would have the capacity to say no are the Congress and the courts, and they're not saying no, or at least not strongly enough and consistently enough. So Stephen Miller isn't really the problem. The problem is a certain flaccid failure to act on the part of the people who have the responsibility to act. So that is why it is essential. What do we say, Artemis? Raise your voice. Is essential, essential, essential. Like, call Stephen Miller out and like make life a living hell for your representatives and be in the streets, and, because he himself is pretty unreachable by any legitimate means. And of course, we're not doing non-legitimate means. We're leaving that to the current administration. So it is absolutely what you describe is hugely problematic on every level, and it's not something that, well, let me put it this way. I don't know a way to deal with it apart from addressing the people who have the power to deal with it. Because as individuals, we don't.
I kind of hope that, I mean, there seems to be a lot of infighting in this administration and in Trump 1, and kind of hope that something happens and he disappears. It was very interesting because Stephen Miller's uncle spoke out that during the first Trump administration that his family had survived the Holocaust, right? And that it was horrible to his uncle that you're literally talking about someone who's descended from people who had to come to this country and who's kicking the door down behind him, you know, or constructing a door behind him. And I don't know that this administration, you know, would respond well. You know, I think others, if they found that some figure was hugely unpopular to the public, would care more. But probably the reasons that we care about Stephen Miller, the administration would not care about. But I think in ways that we can get access to him and email and things like that, it is good to make these people's lives uncomfortable. He was one of the primary architects behind the child separation policy during the first administration, if not the mastermind. And, you know, so I know sometimes we feel like we don't want to harass people or things like that. And obviously we have to be careful because of laws and things like that. But at the same time, I mean, this person was responsible for a policy that was either intentionally or unintentionally so mismanaged and horrible that at the end of the Trump administration, the first Trump administration, there were about 660 kids where no one had any idea who their parents were, where they were. So, yeah, I'm in agreement with you, and I think that he has a lot of President Trump's ear on immigration, because there's been several instances recently where farmers and other industry have approached the administration and said, this is too much. Our operations, people aren't coming to work that we need. We need you to revise your policy. And I think President Trump said certain things that indicated there would be a review. And then many people thought that Stephen Miller pulled that back, because then there was a departure from that idea that there would be a more moderate enforcement policy.
All right, technical difficulties. I think, Hans, to your question, and yes, and to add, I think also taking back the narrative, I think Stephen Miller is trying to craft this idea of illegal, of criminals, of people that are here to take, and it's an idea that we've heard for many years, right? Immigrants are illegals. Immigrants are here to take. They're foreign. They're bringing disease, whatever the narrative that they want to use. But I think he's crafting this image of like how they're praising alligator Alcatraz and all of these ideas that they're floating around, trying to dehumanize immigrants, trying to dehumanize and other people, right? So I think taking back that narrative and saying, okay, yeah, we are here, maybe we are here undocumented, but we are not those things that they are saying. We are not illegals, because nobody is illegal on stolen land, right? We are here sharing the land as those ancestors did, as our brothers and sisters that are African American did, Native American did. And so I think just pushing back on their narrative and showing what we really are is a key concept to do and to follow.
Yeah, I was also going to talk about changing the narrative. I think that and pushing in our own communities, that many of us were all mixed status in our families, right? That the language has changed some, and so people don't relate to it as being relevant to us. And I just think, we have a huge need to be not letting Stephen Miller manage the narrative. It's up to us to be changing it and to be out there expressing the need for that change. And I mean, some of it's so illogical, it boggles the mind of what they're saying and doing. And I just want to honor, what Shane said in your presentation, that it's so ironic, right, that these people that came and murdered and stole land and have been doing it in many iterations over and over again, but that's the origins of this country, and that people could be so self-righteous in these other ways. It's astonishing, but that's what we're living with.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. Is there another question or comment from the audience? All right, we have several. Come over here.
Gracias. I appreciate it. My name is Lourdes. I am a community member in the Central Valley now for 30 plus years, immigrant of Guatemala, and no longer could say transplant from Los Angeles. I really enjoyed the whole program, and I appreciate what you've shared with us, because I currently work with Sirens Services Immigrant Rights Education Network, and I think that one of the things that I'm noticing most is that all of us always assume that everybody else is on the same page, and that's what I appreciated today, that you brought it all into all of us understanding each point of history, even if we thought we knew it, because we all had access to that knowledge through those who gave it to us in their limited capacity. So I think that right now in the current state of the world, because unfortunately whatever this nation is doing is having a terrible effect on our homelands, on our native lands, on the earth, and the environment. And people such as Trump and Stephen Miller, our legislators, our judges, and everyone, we've always just, all of us, and I've been saying it's sort of I feel like it's a renaissance of everything that we always assumed was going to be okay. And we all stayed in that comfort and privilege, and whatever privilege we did gain from what we didn't have from before, or our ancestors. So I think that today, this really was a wonderful gift from your organization and the artivists, in waking us up to making sure that even if we were able to share this, what you shared today, to one more person, it's really going to help us. Here in the Central Valley, we are all the immigrant rights organizations and partners and people who service or not directly or indirectly. We're looking to see how we're going to start preparing for that abuse that has been happening in Southern California. Sirens bases in San Jose, and they're definitely prepping up. So I really urge everyone to find a way to reinforce the only thing that we kind of have right now, which is our hotline or our rapid response network. There's so much fine-tuning that needs to happen to it, and come with solutions, right? Come with open heart, and see how we could serve each other and help each other, because at the end of the day, we need to defend the land we're on, the people who we are, because our children are looking. Our children are seeing us. And I think that that's one of the scariest things, is that it's not what we're not doing, it's what they're seeing that we are doing. And so I think that right now, this opportunity, yesterday I went to the Latinay, they had a film showcase in Tower District. They were so great. They were, on issues of immigrants. But what I'm getting at is we really, all the organizations right now, we are looking for all of us to learn our rights, to know our civil liberties, to understand our history and the timeline of the history that's happened. So if we could share this, even just to one more person, it's going to be very powerful. And definitely in the largest minority we serve, which is the Spanish-speaking community, if this could happen in Espanol and not translated, I think that would be so epic. So, hopefully we could get to do something like that. Puro en español, sería genial. Thank you so much, and I appreciate it. And again, I have a card. If you guys want to help volunteer to become observers or help us with the dispatching line, or if you have a great innovative mind in making sure how work systems, if you're an engineer, if you're a graphic designer, we need all that help. Because I'll tell you, for us at the organizations coming up with a social media thing or a flyer or an action or a demonstration, and still keep up with policy work and day-to-day needs of our immigrant services that we give, it's a lot. So we need all the support. So if you're able to volunteer, please do so. You don't know, even if it's volunteer, bring us water, because we haven't even had time to go get water. So I think that's the level of unity we need to have right now.
Thank you so much for sharing. Any more over there? Mm-hmm.
My name is Gloria, and I came from Merced. I know that there's some things happening right now that really are not with an issue of legality, right? The whole fear aspect of it. You know, that it's really easy to say, be calm, don't be afraid, but people are afraid. And I know at one time, like I think patients mentioned that we've been at these types of things before. And I want to remind us too that we need to also think about what was done to resist certain things. And we are at a crossroads. There was once slavery in this country, and it was abolished. And it took a damn long time to do it. But people that were underground railroads, there were people working. Right now, there are people working on mutual aid. They're not, people are aware of the whole issue of this system having profit before people. And I think this is one of the things that we're dealing with, right? I'm also concerned about the secretive police, and now even our tax money, another robbery, another highway robbery, that's been a transfer of all these monies that are gonna reinforce these masked men, whoever it is. I mean, I myself, I think that they've hired all these insurrectionists, right, from January 6th, because they're riding around in, unmarked cars and, darkened tinted windows, and you could kind of see that. But I know it's controversial, to have people post these things. We are in a high-tech type of a system and a time right now where a lot of that can't be controlled, but I think we do need to put more of some of those examples of people just saying, I really love Unión del Barrio from San Diego and Los Angeles, right? And that the ladies are just saying that you're a terrorist, but it's gonna come to a point where, involving the military, involving, the National Guard. I mean, it's a test case right now in Los Angeles, but I was just wondering if any of you have any comments on that period of time and the resistance and stopping the building of more detention centers. And again, it's the corporate world that's going to end up winning over the misery of our people. And so I think it's important for people to have that clarity of what times we're living right now, and outreach with our communities. That's the most that we can do, and love each other. But it's really hard coming out of this COVID time, where people kind of were suspicious. Oh, you're gonna cough on me, and you can give me COVID, and so we're kind of going through another transition with regards to our personal abilities to relate with each other too. But it's a trying time for all of us, but I do believe we will win at the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody want to comment on resistance? Yeah, Josh.
Right here. There we go. Thank you for that comment and question, because it just reminded me of something I experienced myself earlier this week in the Tower District. It was the first time in the Tower District, just a few blocks away from here, that I saw what the police budget and the things are starting to now look like and transform into, which is not just an unmarked vehicle, but just a regular vehicle. I was just sitting on the street, and it looked like regular cars, regular everything, and then lights were on. I'm like, where did these lights come from? Where did this license plate doesn't say CA exempt? Like all this, and started having questions. 3 of these cars pulled over one car, brought this man and his baby and his girlfriend, I'm assuming, or wife, I'm assuming, out of the car because he violated his parole. And I'm like, and it was a scene that looked as if I'm like, is something going to happen, or is anything like, there are 3, there's like 4, all these cars are, but this is just for one man for just violating his parole and publicly embarrassing, like just all this, like this display of cruelty. Like, it doesn't matter like really what happened. There's nothing right here is warranting this is a waste of money, there's a waste of taxpayer dollar, all this different stuff. But it's the sense of spectacle that is there in order to kill the spirit of those who like make you say, don't fall out of line or this could be you. That has been a constant example of just this history's fascination with the media and how we present things. And it made me, into kind of what you're saying as far as resistance, something that I've learned just from African American history and different things is that sense of spectacle, that sense of the media is the one way of counteracting. So you have people that are now, of course, recording law enforcement, even though they don't want you to. But even if you look historically, if we go back to Emmett Till and why that was such a big example, that his mom wanted to control the narrative and say, no, this is something that happened to my child. This is the injustice. It's brutal, it's ugly, but you have to know what is going on. And the powers that be do not like being exposed. They don't like being put on the spot, and yet they elected a celebrity that goes ahead and exposes and has all their stuff on the spot no matter what. And what's interesting that I'm starting to see is, and what has been really beneficial about this entire event, for instance, in working with Shane and working in my relationship with America and hearing his piece has also made me say, oh, this is something that my people have also experienced. These detention centers, there's those segregated boarding schools, and they even got treated differently in boarding schools, got treated differently in juvenile halls, and the same kind of sterilization, but recognizing that not only is it history that repeats itself, it's a playbook. And we have access to a playbook that is constantly almost thrown in our face, and it's traumatic, so it makes it hard for us to even like accept that this is something that's happening. But when we have dialogue with one another, that's when it's like, okay, we all have experienced this. We all know what this is like, so we can build forward. And how do we combat this? How do we go forward with this? And I think just also to answer your question, Hans, really dialogues like these and coming together cross-culturally, cross-generationally, because that's another big important thing, cross-generationally, a lot more young people need to come out to these things. Like there's a need and a thirst to come out to these things, but we've been affected so much by not only just the internet age, but also COVID. So it's like having to learn how to even engage in community. There's so many steps that we are having to take in order to even make some noise. And I think that just having things like this, having dialogues, having times to just talk and listen to one another is that first step that we can go ahead and take. And so in combating different tools of oppression, because the tools of oppression don't want us to be united. They don't want us to be together. They call us the United States, but they don't want that really. They like it. They like to be very divided. They like to have all the different segregated parts in your cities, your states, and everything. But like, what united really is all I'm saying. So that's what I want to say.
Testing. Okay. Well, in terms of resistance, I always believe that resistance starts from the inside, and especially like for us Native people, one of the first things that they came for when, you know, the colonizers came was they wanted to attack our language first. And that's the very first thing that they ever tried to take away from us. And they did that because they wanted to disconnect us from our people. You know, after they tried to take the language, it's like, okay, it's like, we don't believe in your traditional practices. That's paganism. He's like, so we're going to send you to a boarding school and you're going to be Catholic. You're going to learn about Jesus Christ. You're going to forget about your entire old life. I mean, literally the slogan for the boarding school system was kill the Indian and keep the man. So that is why I always say that, you know, the resistance starts inside of you, because the reason why my people were able to resist so much is because we never forgot who we truly were. I mean, even when we were baptized, you know, we still held on to our creator, our ancestors. It's like we had to integrate in so many different systems that were never made for us to begin with. And that's why we face a lot of generational trauma, because, you know, we're not used to, you know, like, you know, first, like, you know, having to go to church or having to go to a place to worship a God. You know, we believe that our creator is with us always. He's out in nature. He's here with me now. And that's like the most important part, is like, you need to be grounded in order to like help and like resist on behalf of others. You need to like win that war inside of you, and you need to know who you are. You need to know who you stand for. And it's like, are you willing to challenge your preconceived notions? Are you willing to challenge your prejudices? Because so many people live inside an echo chamber where everybody echoes the same opinion and they never question, you know, it's like, is what I'm saying wrong? Is what I'm thinking wrong? And so it's like, you really have to learn how to empty your cup, because how are you going to fill your cup if it's already full with things that you don't want to let go of to begin with? You know, so I always say that it starts at the very beginning. It starts with you. And, you know, it's like, once you are healed and once you can stand strong and say, this is who I am and I'm not going to change for everybody, then nobody can control you and nobody can assimilate you and nobody can take away your culture or your language. You know, for my language specifically that I was speaking during the play, only 2 people can speak it fluently today. And we are trying very hard to revive our language, and that's why I do speak it in the play. And that is a form of resistance, because I want to keep my language and my culture alive. And so when they can't take your soul, they can never control you, ever.
Thank you. I have one question over here.
Well, can I respond really quickly? Can I follow Shane? Shane, both of my parents' families were Buddhist when they went into camp. And I grew up thinking my dad was either agnostic or atheist, because there was no place to practice Buddhism in Detroit when I was growing up. And I just think that it's not a personal problem in some ways, the entitlement of white Christianity in this country, but it drives so much, and we're really seeing the impact of it now. And so I just wanted to step into the world with you and share that part of my family history too.
I just want to say that not everything is negative. I mean, it hurts right now to see what the people are going through. I mean, it's, as an empathetic, it just really hurts me. And Gilbert Padilla told me when I was young, and he was my mentor, that we have to take into account the small victories, because you never run up to the big victories without the small victories. And Patience and a couple of us have been at it for a long time, and some of our victories was planting seeds, and we see the trees growing. A couple of weeks ago, you all know what happened at the cherry auction. The guy was stubborn. He was going to let ICE in, and, you know, we sort of educated the people, and we're continuing to do that, is don't spend your money where you're not respected. As of today, our do not let ICE in into the cherry auctions are up, the signs. It took negotiations, it took pressure. We were not targeting him per se, although he was very vicious against what our councilman Miguel Arias did. Our point is, you don't respect the people that are shopping there. You don't respect the people that are the vendors there. So we're going to launch this business plan, don't shop where you're not respected. You have value. And today we have a victory. It took us less than a month to get those signs up. It took us that time to educate this fool. And we know that he donates a lot of money to MAGA and he donates a lot of money to the other side, but he relies where he gets his money. And I think that the more we educate people, even if it takes one at a time, and spend a lot of time negotiating with him, we need to be able to put our hate aside and have that conversation. A lot of people don't like me. I don't care, as long as you learn from me. And I think that's what our objective is. We have to count the small victories. And I'm very grateful for the ACLU and all the attorneys that are stepping up and have all these lawsuits across the world, our nation. And when I saw the TikTok from the sheriff in Kerr County give praise to the Mexican rescuers for rescuing his daughter and his 2 grandkids, and only now he said all Mexicans are welcome in Kern County, only because it affected him directly. And so one sheriff, big difference. One cherry auction owner, big difference. So let's not all be negative. It's hard to think of a future path without, going to court or going against the politicos who have sold us down the drain. We have to look at other strategy. And one of them is don't shop where you're not welcome. Another one is going out and talking to people. I am so blessed that I've been working with campesinas in delivering donations and being able to sit down and have a glass of water with them and tell me what's happening in your community so I can be your voice. Because I know it's hard for you to go to Fresno, etc. It takes that type of work and devotion to social justice. But it's also heartbreaking when I hear that one guy, an American citizen, was placed in the ICE van on Vallarta at Gettysburg and Cedar, and I cannot get him to give me a declaration so that the ACL can use it to tie ICE's hand just like we tied the Border Patrol's hands. It's so frustrating. But I just want to remind everybody that not everything is negative. It's hard to see, but count your little victories. And like the poet Corky Gonzalez said in Yo Soy Joaquin, we will endure. We will overcome this. We won't go away. We haven't gone away. Those of us that were here before the borders were established, we're still here. And we're not going to leave. And once this fiasco is over, Trump and all his goons are going to be in alligator Alcatraz.
Thank you so much for that reminder. I think we have time for like one more, and then we will wrap up. We have one right here.
I'm Red Feather. I enjoy coming here, and I'm honored to be a part of this. And all those words are dear to my soul and heart, And we've all been through trials and tribulations. And I speak for a two-spirit. In my culture, that's the gay, that's the ABC group. And through all this, we all suffered through our parents, even through our own age group. And the panel, you've endured just as much. And I'm glad they have this circle, because this is a circle of people. People that are one. In my tribe, that's what we are. We're one people. So in that, I would like to say, we do tend to forget. That's because they brainwashed us, put all that stuff in us. We're scared today. My grandfather told me we used to have groups where we talked. Just talked. Made things better, son. Today, it's very rare. And that was almost 20 years ago. He left me with all ideas and thoughts. Even in my own group, we tend to keep ourselves in fear. We don't say it because we're too proud or too honorable to speak of what we've done or what has happened. And today, it's in pictures and movies. But most of those movies and some of those pictures leave some of the truth out because it's too heart-wrenching to see it all as it is. Because it's bloody, it's hurtful, and it carries the next generation of our children and our grandchildren. So I do understand you need both, the bad and the good. You know, it's easy to talk about it because we're already reforming our words so it doesn't hurt anyone. But you need both, the sun for the flowers to grow and our fruits and our trees, the moon so we can relax and enjoy that calmness. You know, and I know it's hard and difficult to speak about the whole truth because we were programmed to keep some of that out the door so it doesn't hurt nobody. And we've gotten so political today. Oh, you can't say that. Oh, I might hurt that person's feelings. Oh, my God. Then we spoke with truth and words. Yeah, they carried much pain and cut worse. But for me, sitting here and being as old as my brothers and my sisters here, and you understand where the words take you. Because it is true. The pen is mightier than the sword. But we could use that for our benefit. And you guys are doing it as best that I could see of using that pen. And for the natives here, the Chicanos, Mexicans, we're all one. And it's a good thing that we're here. But this has been done several generations, millennia. We sat here and talked of what we can do to make it better. But yet, it's another season. That's why we call that a circle. We always get back to that same circle. And yeah, there is change. And we see change every year, every time. But understanding how far can we push it? Can we stop it this time? Can we really have this end? How many more seasons, how many more generations do we have to keep doing that circle? It's hard every season, every year. And we're always getting back to the same circle. And we do have fighters, we have our warriors. And you guys are the warriors up today. Yes, each and every one is here today are warriors. Because we were fighting for a better life for us, the next generation, and our grandkids. So all I have to say is there was something missing up there. The Two-Spirit. Because they endured, and they're still fighting. And ICE is wanting to take them too from us. I'm a proud father of my children. And yes, I tell them the same, keep fighting, keep moving. But the stress gets us all. So I ask you to remember, if you're fighting for one, fight for all. Because every one of us is a brother, is a sister. And it doesn't mean, oh, we got to be segregated. Just me. We're all here. For what reason? The Creator told us. We need this. We need to stop this hate. Stop this violence. Stop the fear within us. And I thank you for being here. I'm grateful to take your time. And I apologize. But the Two-Spirit in me just got me. And I enjoy it. Because you need both parts. That's why we're the man and woman. Together, we make better lives. It should be the same with a panel of play, of real life. We didn't hand over work. We just did it. I'd like to thank you guys for your time and for the day. I hope.
All right. I want to thank everybody for participating. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, for bringing questions, comments. Thank you to our panelists for sharing their expertise, and thank you to our actors for sharing their personal stories as well, and for representing a shared story as well. Josh, I'm going to pass it on to you for what's next.
Testing 1, 2. All right, good. All right. Carlos, you want to come up and join me real quick? So, pretty much that is the conclusion for the events for the event. So right now we do have food that is being prepared to be served. So we are done with the event. So thank you all for coming. And we just have this last hour up until about 6 o'clock to go ahead and feast, enjoy the food, enjoy all the different refreshments. But any closing remarks, Gina or Carlos, that you want to give before I close out?
We just got a request to maybe we can do a moment of silence for the life that was lost yesterday in the ICE raid. And so if you can join us for a moment in reflecting and staying silent. Thank you, and may this moment of silence also fill us up with hope for what's coming up. Thank you.
Just thank you for lifting your voice and for not staying quiet, everyone, for being here, for everyone who shared on the wall. Thank you for just being here. Thank you.
Again, thank you all so much. Thank you all for coming. Like we have, if you haven't written anything for your relationship with America, feel free. We also still have the multimedia exhibit that will still be going on for a little bit longer, and we have food and refreshments to go that way. And feel free to mingle and linger. And thank you all for coming.